would like to ask to end the non-public and to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Kelly, would you please call the roll when you can?
Mayor McEachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
And before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I would just like to have us all remember today, September 5th, is Portsmouth Peace Treaty Day. Stephanie Secord, who has done a lot of work on that, is here in attendance. Chuck Doliak, who's not here, have both been instrumental in promoting this, and we should all be pretty proud of the work that went in from citizen diplomacy, and let us think of that as we stand and rise and hope for peace throughout the world if it's possible. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have two proclamations. First, for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and advocates, nonprofits, healthcare professionals, researchers, and families impacted want the people of Portsmouth to understand the stark reality that children facing cancer experience every day. And whereas cancer is the leading cause of death by disease for American children under the age of 15, approximately 46 children per day, or 16,790 children per year are diagnosed with cancer, over 40,000 children are in treatment. And whereas Childhood Cancer Awareness Month was created in 1999 as a time to celebrate advances in childhood cancer treatment and survivorship care, remember the children we've lost, and engage new advocates to join in the mission of achieving a day when every child diagnosed with cancer can live a long and healthy life. And whereas in 2022, the President of the United States reinvigorated the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, whose goal is to cut the cancer death rate by half over the next 25 years. However, there have only been 4 new drugs approved by the FDA in the past 2 decades to specifically treat childhood cancer. And whereas such local champions of childhood cancer awareness as 17-year-old Rye resident Amy Kitstead and her Go Gold campaign, along with the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services online New Hampshire Health Wisdom System, strive to keep the Seacoast community informed on the latest cancer research and treatment options, and encourage education on exposure risks, prevention, and early detection as the strongest tools we have in the war on cancer. Now, therefore, I, Daglin McEachran, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Council and citizens of Portsmouth, urge the community to pause and remember the children we have lost to this terrible disease, and work to support the effort to find new therapies to treat and defeat pediatric cancer so children not only survive cancer, but thrive. To hereby proclaim September in Portsmouth as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, given with my hand in the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this 5th day of September 2023. And I believe we have Amy with us this evening. Amy, if you would please come up and accept this and all the work that you've done. Next up, this is also one close to my heart because I remember the test to get a library card in Portsmouth. I don't know if it's actually not the same. Tiernan could do it, but you had to spell your name. And I tell you, Daglin McEachran was a tough name to write out. Whereas since 1987, Library Card Sign-Up Month has been held each September to mark the beginning of the school year. During this month, the American Library Associations and libraries unite in a national effort to ensure all children sign up for their own library cards. And whereas the Portsmouth Public Library and its professional staff are invaluable resources there to assist all members of the community, adults, children, business owners and employees, city staff and visitors alike, with a wealth of free materials and guidance shaped to meet their interests and needs while saving library card holders hundreds of dollars. And whereas a library card is one of the most cost-effective back-to-school supplies available, offering educational resources and services for students of all ages, from free access to STEAM programs and activities, educational apps, in-person and virtual help, and technology to the expertise of librarians. And whereas with a library card, community members can discover new and exciting worlds that fire the imagination. From borrowing audiobooks to streaming movies to taking virtual do-it-yourself classes to learn new skills, the Portsmouth Public Library opens the door to so much there is to access with a library card. A Portsmouth Public Library card is a doorway to past, present, and future and the best possible momentum to acquire during Portsmouth's 400 year. Now, therefore, I, Dago McCachran, Mayor, hereby proclaim the City of Portsmouth joins with cities across the nation in declaring September Library Card Month and encourage all members of the community to get a library card to discover all of the services, resource, programs, and dedicated staff who make the Portsmouth Public Library free and open to all, one of the city's greatest treasures. Given with my hand and the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this 5th day of September 2023. Thank you. Thank you, Christine, for all the work you do. When I really can spell her name, we'll come back.
Next time
All right, next up, we have the acceptance of minutes for August 21st. I'd wait a motion to approve the minutes of August 21st, 2023.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then we have public comment. We will start with Roy Helsel on proposed budget question.
Good evening, Roy Helsel, 777 Middle Road. I have a question about the new proposed budget. We have the same average populations for over the last 5 years. City manager has hired 40 new people in the last 2 years. Has the city workload gone up that much? Did we have that many workers retire or quit? Has City Hall workload gone up so much that why are we doing all this hiring? Is it because all the development in the city? We had reevaluations on a 2-year schedule, but now they were canceled. Now we're going to have a mandatory one next year. What's that going to do for the citizens? Are all the property owners going to pay equal shares? The hotels, the apartment owners, the business property owners, as the homeowners do? Why are the city's taxes going up? Why are the reserves going to be used this year's budget? I thought this was for emergencies only. Thank you. It'd be nice to have some of these questions answered. Oh, I understand now the city manager is on the Peas Board, when we normally had a city resident that volunteered to do this job. She also is the representative on the McIntyre now. It would be nice to have some of these questions answered and clarified. Oh, does the city receive any money for having our fire department out at Pease? It's the only fire department they have. And does the city receive anything from all the development out there? Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next up, Rick Beckstead, Budget 101.
Good evening, Rick Beckstead, 1395 Visitor Street. I tried to separate this between this and public hearing, so here it goes. So the last council actually proposed a budget which passed of $123 million. I know most of you are going to go and say, including the mayor, that we had $125 million because of the skateboard park. If that was the case, why did this council in, I believe it was June of last year, pass as far as with the CIP doing a bond of $1.8 million and later on this year of $1 million? As far as I'm concerned, and as far as the public is concerned, we have a budget of 123. Now we have $137 plus million. Tonight, you're about to add 1.4. The supplemental is only 900. The other 500,000 is coming from somewhere else that's already built in the budget. So now we're at $138.4 million. And let us not all forget, we went and used surplus money last year to offset the taxes by $4 million. And that was ARPA fund money that we ended up using one time. And then this year, you went and you used a surplus. First time we've ever really gone and done a large surplus like this. If you go back, it's usually about $2 million to use this. But we did 4.4 this year, with a total of 142, somewhere between that and $143 million. That's the budget. That's what you passed. That's what you continue to pass tonight. I have no problem, none whatsoever, with the commitments that we have gone and made to our unions, because these are the people that service our community. And again, this is where crossing over. But you should have all seen this coming. Tom Clausen should have seen this coming. The city manager should have seen this coming. You had, I don't know how many meetings behind closed doors when it came to the budget. At least that's what the agendas went and said. You all should have seen this coming. And it's very unfortunate for the city of Portsmouth and the taxpayers that we are the ones that are going to pay the taxes on this. My taxes have already gone up. I'm paying over $400 a month when it comes to my food bill. I'm paying $300 a month more in my fuel bill than I did before. I'm going to pay, with this new budget coming in, about $400 to $500 more. Enough's enough. We've got to do something about this. Your first obligation is for the residents of Portsmouth and to see what is best for them, and keeping the taxes low, not raising them. Thank you.
Mark from the, Elliot, sorry. Esther Kennedy on sewage plant.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. Last council meeting, I was taken back, and I almost felt like calling Bolarama to see if they lost a trophy. There was a huge trophy given to the city council and the city wastewater treatment team for a plant. And I'm really perplexed because the plant still smells. It smelled the last couple days. It stinks. I know that the pumps are still not pumping. There's still a fix there. There's still one bypass to 2 pumps. All the sewage is going through that. God forbid that gives away. I know CSOs are still being dumped in the water. I also know that we had to close numerous beaches this summer because of effluent. And then we have the 3 cylinders on the island, well, 2, one more should be built. And what we were told a couple of city council meetings ago was it was holding the sewage because one of the cylinders was down. How can we get an award for a plant that's in trouble? How can we give an award for the fact that we're dumping CSOs into our water column? How can we get an award because you're bypassing 2 pumps that are broken down and only 1 pump, and it still smells? So I guess I have to ask you, what's going on, folks? This is our infrastructure. If you want to continue to build, you need to support the infrastructure. And you haven't. It's a mess. And it's going to cost millions of dollars to fix. And right now, because of us, I believe, Esther Kennedy, there are beaches being closed and people can't go in the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Next up, Sue Polidora on various.
Sue Polidora, Middle Street, and based on what I just heard previously, there's quite a few issues that need your attention and that haven't gotten your attention. And budget is totally out of control, in my opinion. Obviously, the water treatment facility is not up to snuff. But I also would like to talk to you about this amendment that's coming up. I think is number 2 on the amendment to the Code of Ethics. Have that gone through our legal department and find out whether this is constitutional or not? You really can prevent someone that is not, even though they're on a land use board or another quasi-judicial boards, to be able to opine if they're doing it on a non-related board. We need consistency on this. There have been many inconsistent issues regarding this. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I had the misfortune of parking in an area. You know that area that we toured maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago where McNabb Buildings is proposing these new changes? I figured since I couldn't park in the parking garage because that area is being taken with equipment to do the repairs in there, that I would park on this small parking lot on the side. And I went to the Athenaeum for about an hour. I came back, I have a ticket. And it based on I went to the parking office downtown, and they said that isn't us. That's a private parking. They're a profit for-profit parking, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I've only lived in this city for 40 years. Why don't I know that there's people making money when all of those different parkings are, where are those parkings? I park in a non-marked spot. I have a veteran's plate in my car, and I'm like, this area is not honoring any kind of the guidelines that the city have. Well, I'd like to know where are those places so I can avoid them. Why isn't, if I don't know about it and I'm fairly informed, I can guarantee you there's a lot of people out there that don't either. So we would like to know, I would like to know about this, and I will be in the parking meeting on Thursday to find all these answers. I just wanted to give you a heads up because now I'm curious and I need to find answers for all these things. So thank you much.
Thank you, Sue. Next up, Peter Huda. Let's talk snow plowing. Plowing is in quotes.
Good evening, Peter Huda, 280 South Street. Snow plowing. I'm referencing the city manager item number 6. This is a request for first reading to amend Chapter 7 of the parking ordinance, traffic ordinance on snow plowing. So my question is, why is this change being brought forward now? Hopefully that'll be answered later. And I would ask you to please consider all residents and taxpayers when you're changing the mode of announcements here. What it looks like is it's going to be requested that this change be made when there is 2 inches or more for the residents, which is fine. Then it says, or when snow accumulation from plowing operations requires a coordinated removal effort to be determined at the director's discretion. So my question would be, how do the residents and taxpayers who use the garages when they have to, how are they going to know 24 hours a day? So you answer that down below and say, this change, there's a change to the notification on all of this, and you say you're going to use social media. Not all of our residents, especially the elderly, are on social media. So I would ask for clarification on that point. I would also ask for clarification on text, signage, and where are you going to post your signage? At City Hall when we have a snowstorm so that nobody could get here? The last question is phone notification. So I don't know how this works because I do not participate in this, but I have a serious concern about anybody who has to use this and the method of communication. It looks like you really want to get rid of Channel 22, which is a stalwart for many of our elderly and the residents who use this. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next up, Francis Cormier on another air show.
Francis Cormier, Melbourne Street. 2 years ago when they had the air show, I live fairly near the air base, so I went down on my bicycle, and they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a parking permit. And I tried to explain to them that not everyone drives a car. Some people come by bike, and some people, like from Panaway Manor, walked, because it's close enough just to walk, and they wouldn't let us in because we didn't have a parking permit. And I hope that doesn't repeat itself again this year with this air show, because I intend on going. I live near enough to the air base that and I explained to the gatekeeper that air base belongs to all us American people, and that you can't exclude people because they come on a bicycle or they walk. And he said, well, I'm just following orders. So the orders come from up above, and that's something that should be cleaned up. So anyway, this year they still got the parking permits and all that stuff. So I hope we don't see a repeat. But one thing I noticed is outside the gate, a lot of people never got in. And they were watching outside the gate by Panaway Manor. And why weren't those people allowed to go on the base? Just because they didn't have a parking permit. Because all the parking permits are sold out. They're all gone. And, if they pull that again this year, you're going to be refusing people like they did 2 years ago if they repeat the same sing-song dance. They're going to be refusing people because they come on a bike and stuff, and it really isn't right. That belongs to all of us, whether you have a parking permit or not. So eventually I fought hard enough, I got in. They let me in. Shut the guy up, let him in. So they let me in. But it's too bad when it's you have to like sort of fight to get into an air show just because you don't have a parking permit.
Thank you, Francis. We have Robin Rousseau on Zoom, and then we'll go back to Mark from the park.
Hi, Robin Russo, 90 Fleet Street. I want to make a comment to follow up with Esther. Thank you, Esther, for those comments. We're calling South Mill Pond a big toilet bowl. It's unsafe to go over there. It is so unnecessary. But I'm really calling tonight because of the snow ban changes that are coming through to you tonight. I've spent hours through the citywide neighborhood group discussing emergency snow ban recommendations, and in the write-up I saw, there was not one of them there. So I'm going to ask Bagman Bagley to send this back to the citywide neighborhood group, who are his constituents, who have spoken about this many times and have made many recommendations, to kick it back to them for recommendations before it goes to Parking and Traffic Safety Committee meeting, always at 8:30 in a weekday morning when no one can attend. So there's lots of issues. For example, they want to pull out the police chief and the head of DPW as part of the decision-making process of whether or not to call an emergency snow ban. Now, these two people own their budgets that would affect an emergency snow ban, instead of some designee, it says, that would be assigned whether or not we're going to have an emergency snow ban. Well, I don't want some designee making that decision. I want the people who own the budget to make the decision, because I live at the corner of Fleet and Congress, and I've seen snow plowing on days that don't need snow plowing. And I'm like, oh, there they go, trying to make their overtime money. Yeah, well, that's our money. Also, a 2-inch rule. We always had a 3-inch rule, and that seemed very reasonable. And there are a number here I won't go over, but the citywide neighborhood group will give you their recommendations for emergency snow ban procedures, including fees and when to take your car off the road or after the snow ban is called off, because there are issues involving elderly and handicapped people that are not being considered in that process. Another thing I want to speak about is the 911 emergency system that we have in place in Portsmouth. I got firsthand experience of the change of that last night when I tried to call dispatch, and now you get press 1 for dispatch, press 2 for this one. I press 1 for dispatch, nobody answers, you get voicemail message in the middle of the night. That's not good for an emergency, so I'm like, okay, I'll call 911. Then I get 911, some New Hampshire 911. She's not even in Portsmouth, doesn't know any of the streets or issues, and then she makes me repeat the whole story again, then kicks into Brentwood Sheriff's Department, and then they want to hear a whole story. I'm thinking, if this is a real emergency, somebody's going to die by the time anyone gets to their home. If they're being broken into or somebody's having a heart attack, it's going to take way too long for police or fire to get to their place. So we need a change, and I have a call into the police chief to voice those thoughts. But I think my neighbors need to know what's going on with the 911 system in case that affects them.
Thank you, Robin.
That's all I have today.
Mark from the Park. American flags.
Yes, good evening. I brought this up before. I don't understand why all the communities all around us have beautiful American flags coming into their city or town and also in the downtown. And we don't have that, and it really bothers me. Anyway, I'll play a little song.
As is your constitutional right.
That's correct.
My people of this country, and we're under attack. They banning us, they cancel us for speaking the facts. If you man enough, come stand with us, take USA back. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. American flags. American flags. And every time we pull up, all you're gonna see is American flags. I'm never gonna pretend that I give a damn. Anybody who's offended can get it, we throwing hands. Anybody not trying to make America great again. Don't punk, you a clown, better know where I stand. I'm a white boy with the middle fingers in the air, dog. We don't give a what. I know white boys
Wait, hold on. You can't, the profanity, Mark. Come on, man.
You can't have,
Do you listen to the lyrics? Mark, all right. We appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll bring something a little softer next.
Okay.
I just been getting into rap and hip hop lately because it all makes a lot of sense.
Next up, public hearing and vote on ordinances and/or resolutions.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I motion that we suspend the rules to bring forward items number 10D and 11A, 1 through 5, which is the public hearing on the funding for the contracts.
Second.
We have, so understand that we can do it before the second reading ordinance on the ethics and the EDC, but we do have the ordinance on the Cultural Commission, and we do have speakers that are prepared to speak on that. I understand there's a lot of folks that are here on the appropriation, but I don't believe that this is a long presentation on the Arts and Cultural Commission, but I would look to the the Arts and Cultural Commission. What is the length of the presentation, Barbara? Or Russ? So we got a motion
I'll
on the floor.
withdraw my motion until
And then we'll
after
make
the-
it right after this. Great. Awesome. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Karen.
First of all, I think it needs to be said that I can't remember the last time I felt this safe. So, thanks, everybody. My name is Barbara Massar, and I'm the Executive Director of Pro Portsmouth. But tonight, I'm here as the co-chair of the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofits Committee. Also want to acknowledge our other members out in the audience, if you'd please stand. Also, Russ Grazier, he's co-chair. We've been co-chair together. And then Alan Chase on the end there. He's co-chair of the Cultural Plan Committee, which we're going to talk about tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, city staff, and fellow residents of Portsmouth. On behalf of the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofits Committee, the Cultural Plan Subcommittee, we are here this evening as advocates for a new ordinance creating a City of Portsmouth Arts and Cultural Commission. In order to explain why we're here presenting this new ordinance, it's important to know our origin story. The Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the Arts and Nonprofits was assembled in January of 2021 to identify and address the needs, concerns, and issues facing Portsmouth-based nonprofit arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations as we all navigated the COVID pandemic. The committee's primary goals were to work with the city to foster an environment that supports and nurtures our arts, cultural, and historic preservation organizations, and where possible, to identify resources that could aid in their success in 2021 and beyond. The committee collected data and identified overarching issues that our nonprofits have faced and continue to face, and in the year-end report to the City Council, we identified actions the city could take to support the arts and culture scene in the coming years. We worked with leadership from Portsmouth-based arts, cultural, historic preservation organizations, including, but not limited to, the performing arts, arts education, museums, cultural centers, and historic preservation. We also look to other communities for models of success that can be leveraged here in Portsmouth. As a result of that, 7 recommendations were delivered to the City Council in December 2021. Number 1, direct support for Americans for the Arts' upcoming Arts and Economic Prosperity 6 study. Number 2, marketing Portsmouth as an arts and cultural destination to aid in the economic recovery of our arts organizations as they emerged from the pandemic. Number 3, collaborative community projects led by Portsmouth arts and culture nonprofits to jumpstart the local creative economy in 2022 and beyond. Number 4, direct support to independent local artists through artist relief grants. Number 5, identify ways to address affordable housing concerns for creative economy workers. Number 6, allocation of 4% of the city's American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funding to support the above noted projects. And number 7, the extension of the Blue Ribbon Committee for 24 months, the duration of the incoming City Council's term, to work with city staff to develop budgets and oversee the above projects and to create a new cultural plan for the city of Portsmouth. In January of 2022, newly sworn-in Mayor McEachran extended the work of our committee, and we began addressing the list of projects that had been outlined in the 2021 year-end report. And now I'll turn the podium over to the co-chair of the Cultural Plan Subcommittee, Karen Rosania.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. So it's an exciting time to be presenting here in front of all of you. And I just wanted to introduce myself. So I am a local artist here in Portsmouth, resident and small business owner. And as Barbara mentioned, I have been acting as the Cultural Plan Subcommittee co-chair since its inception, since earlier this year. And I wanted to provide a little bit more history regarding our subcommittee, share some of our key findings, and most importantly, ask for your support. So in the fall of 2022, the city posted a call for a cultural plan subcommittee membership applications. I was one of the responders. And the newly created 18-member subcommittee, a combination of new appointees and then arts and nonprofits committee members, was charged with developing a new cultural plan to be included in the city's next master plan. And I think, as many are aware this evening, the last cultural plan for the city of Portsmouth was developed in 2002. So we're overdue and much needed. So the cultural plan subcommittee, comprised of artists, residents, city and art leaders, developed an overall project plan and looked to other municipalities to learn about their current cultural planning processes and any best practices. The cultural plan subcommittee learned that several municipalities had, in fact, a city-embedded arts and cultural commission responsible for implementing their community's cultural plan. In addition, a city-embedded arts and cultural commission enabled better alignment and qualification for municipal, state, and federal grants, which is key in terms of funding. We also looked within Portsmouth's past creation of a commission, ArtSpeak, as well as other current standing committees and commissions, in particular the Economic Development Commission. It's worth noting that the guiding principles of the proposed ordinance here this evening creates a commission that will support all arts and cultural concerns, both nonprofit and for-profit, and its membership will include volunteers representing nonprofit organizations, local businesses, individual artists, musicians, and residents. At year's end, both the Arts and Nonprofits Committee and the Cultural Plan Subcommittee will sunset after completing the task of creating a new cultural plan. But with both committees dissolved, I ask, how will the cultural plan be implemented? This led to the Cultural Plan Subcommittee to recommend the establishment of a permanent Portsmouth Arts and Cultural Commission. We respectfully ask for your votes to support the creation of a new City Arts and Cultural Commission so that we have a continuous, dedicated body of individuals to fully implement the new cultural plan for the City of Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Barbara. Any questions from the council? Seeing none, I will ask that we have a, just trying to find right here, open up the public hearing for anybody wishing to speak to, for, or against the creation of the Cultural Arts and Cultural Commission.
Good evening. Rick Beckstead, 1395 Islington Street. I mean, what can you say? We were challenged, the last council, with the task of keeping things vibrant, keeping things moving. And this is one of the very first things that myself and other councilors had come up with in hopes that this would actually come to be. I mean, there's some great members, new, I'm not familiar with, but a lot of the original ones that are there, Barbara being one, Russ being one, and others. I hoped, I dreamed. I really am proud and amazed that we've gone and taken this step. You know, it was mentioned with ArtSpeak. It wasn't done properly. It was an outside organization that we actually went and gave money to. But money didn't go where it was necessarily supposed to go. It was an organization. They had expenditures. They were given an office here at City Hall at one time. We actually went and used parking fund money, a percentage, to be able to go and fund it. And I still think we can. And it does meet the New Hampshire RSA that we could use parking money, and I'm not talking the garage. I mean, offset expenditures and stuff like that, but a percentage would actually go to the Arts and Cultural to be able to go and meet the needs of the community and the members that are here. This was an important committee and board, still is today. This is the first one that really went and spoke, because most of the people that take part of these nonprofit organizations don't live here. That was really important. I actually had to convince several people that it was something that was important and asked legal to be able to go and do so. And it was, depending on the perspective of things. They provide a service for this community that we all take part of. The restaurants, the people. I mean, this is what gives structure. This is what's part of Portsmouth, what makes Portsmouth. It's very important to be able to go and have that. The other thing that I found out is legal, and I tried, and again, you guys had it a lot easier. See, during the pandemic, we served, I think it was 7 months, maybe in person, 2.5 months up till March. I mean, I see the mayor shaking his head. And then I think sometime just after the summer, it was September, we had about 5 months together. See, we work better in person as humans than we do behind screens. I've watched many of them, Councilor Tabor and Mayor McEachran. Very frustrating to be able to go and try and get your point across, who was talking, to be able to run a meeting. I did that for over 1.5 years, and it was the most difficult thing I ever had to do, and I hope that no one, I even said to Mayor McEachran, that it goes away, and I know it's not going away, but you never have to be put to the test of what we all were. But there was another thing that I found out can be done. I was going through, and I don't do a lot of fast food, but I went through Taco Bell. And if any of you have ever gone through Taco Bell before, they'll actually go and they have a campaign where you do a roundup, just like you do in other states. Florida, it's all over the place. It goes to SeaWorld and stuff like that. I mentioned this to the committee, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but again, during a pandemic. You can do a roundup campaign that would actually go for every restaurant, every hotel, legally, and just have them round up. It's the nearest cent that would go to a fund for this committee, so that everyone was paying a little bit in there that was coming and partaking in all of the shows and the hotels and the restaurants in this community. I beg and I urge somebody to be able to go and try and see if this funding is possible. I've mentioned it, and again, I know the city manager is a very busy woman, and I mentioned it to Judy in financing, and we have a lot of important issues, but this is a really important issue, and I think it's a simple thing to be able to go so that everyone is providing for this committee. I commend you for going, and hopefully this will pass and go to third reading so that we will actually have a true Arts and Cultural Committee again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the Arts and Cultural Commission?
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors. My name is Tom Koffel, 53 Rogers Street, and kind of what he said. But I was am a member of the Cultural Plan Subcommittee, and I was in the work group that was looking at this ordinance. And I just wanted to share a little bit of my experience working with that group. And one of the tasks that I took on myself was to look at the American for the Arts study from 2015 and just what was the impact to Portsmouth in terms of real dollars. And in 2015, the fiscal year study, it was a total of $58 million, and that's up from $42 million in 2011. Currently, the American for the Arts study is being conducted, and we'll have some more data by the end of the year. But out of that $58 million, $21.5 million is spent by the arts and nonprofit institutions themselves. So that's in hiring people and getting things printed and paying the city to close down streets, paying the city to pick up the trash later. All that money is right from the arts and nonprofit institutions. The audience spends $36.6 million annually, and that doesn't include the cost of admission. So that's on top of the admission. They're spending $36.6 million here in Portsmouth. And that averages about $30 per person that comes to Portsmouth to take part in some arts and cultural event. So I was really, really surprised at how big the impact is. And that's really why the whole Arts and Cultural Commission is modeled after the Economic Development Commission, because it's such an economic impact. So I do hope you will pass this tonight, and look forward to serving on it some year, not next year, but some year. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Any other speakers rising for the Arts and Cultural Commission. Going once, going twice. Closing the public hearing. Any council questions, deliberations? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to say tonight that it's truly an honor as a city councilor to serve on the Arts and Nonprofits Committee with this talented group of people that are here tonight. And it's also been an honor to serve on the Cultural Planning Subcommittee. I'm really excited that they brought forward this ordinance, and I hope that everyone on the City Council supports it tonight.
Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Your Honor. I want to vote for this, and I think it will have good support. It's very exciting that we would have a permanent arts commission for the city, as one of the speakers said, embedded in the city government. I went back to the last cultural master plan, and there's so much more that we can do. The master plan back then talked about engaging our young people and making spaces in the city, common squares. We have music in Market Square. Where else could we create venues for the arts that we could all enjoy? Neighborhood cultural programming was another goal. What if we brought theater out into the neighborhoods on summer evenings, things like that? You know, a lot of cities have what's called Porch Fest. One night, all the local bands play on different people's porches. You know, these are the kind of things that we can see flourish, but we need some agency to help make this happen. So I'm really excited about it.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. I think this has got like a 9-0 vote on this coming up from what I can tell, but just quickly add my 2 cents. I was lucky enough to go to a Theater by the Sea remembrance project, and if you can imagine 40 years ago, which I can't really because I was just born, but it was the beginning of what Portsmouth is kind of known as now. And what I said there, I'll say tonight, that it's impossible to imagine Portsmouth without the arts. And in government, you don't try to make things worse. I mean, plenty of people probably think we do. But the goal is to make things better. That's ultimately the why the 9 of us, you know, are up here, and why all of you serve the city of Portsmouth in so many different ways. But in order to be better, you have to imagine better, and the arts allow us to imagine a better world than the world that we live in today. And I'm really thankful that I grew up in a community that valued the arts, because I can think of things that are bigger than myself, and it's an awesome opportunity. So voting for this is a no-brainer for me. I was proud to vote for it when Mayor Beckstead brought it forward. It was needed then, it's still needed now, and look forward to supporting it. All in favor?
Aye.
Wait, did we actually get a motion? We didn't get a motion. I knew it.
I was just
I
about
knew
to
it.
say
I
something,
knew
but
it.
you-
Can we? I'd wait a motion to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the September 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mayor, I'd like to suspend the rules and bring this up for a third reading tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Need a wait a motion. Councilor Cook.
I move to pass third and final reading of this ordinance amendment.
Is there a second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, guys. Thanks for all the work that you do. Now, I know that there's a ton of people that are looking for a couple agenda items a little later. There's what I've been told is a 2-minute and 59-second presentation on the EDC. And given that there could possibly be a lot of public speakers on this, and it could be a longer time, I'd like to keep the agenda through the HDC or the EDC, and then get to the TAs and the budget appropriation. So next up is the public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 4, Section 1.402, Economic Development Commission, subsections A, B, and C. There was a presentation.
Your Honor, the chairman of the Economic Development Commission, Phil Cohen, is here to give a super brief, very brief, did we mention brief presentation?
Phil, there's a lot of people that Keeping you safe here, bud.
Great. Hi, good evening, everybody. Appreciate the intent or hope for brevity. We'll strive to stick with that. Tough act to follow up, and thank you for all the effort that has gone into that. Tonight, we are before you with second reading for the proposed ordinance change. I just wanted to speak to how this came about. The EDC, I've been fortunate enough to serve on it for more than a decade. It's a great organization with a lot of variety and background of the commissioners. At times, we find ourselves a commission without necessarily a mandate, given that we serve as an advisory board to the council. We find that in times that we may not be tasked with something from the council, we want to provide the most value that we can to the city. And so at our strategic retreat earlier this year, there was a discussion on revisiting the existing ordinance that was last approved, I believe, in 1990 and amended maybe in 1997. So it felt a little bit dated, and that we should take a fresh look at it with current eyes, given some of the work we've been doing surveying business community. The parking garage was a large topic that we took on for many years. That we're fortunate enough now to have a new garage and that work behind us. So wanting to serve the best way that we can with the city and utilize the resources that we have on the commission, a working group was established to come up and propose what you're now seeing as the modification to the existing ordinance. And we're eager to continue to serve and eager for projects that the council may see fit for the Economic Development Commission, but in times where the council is busy working on a lot of the other topics and projects that you have at hand, we want to continue good work and being good stewards of our business community and interfacing and liaising with those folks on behalf of the city and for the council. So I would welcome any questions or comments that folks have, and we just appreciate the support and the relationship that we have with the council and look forward to deepening that in years ahead.
Thank you, Phil, and for all that you've done for the city of Portsmouth after a decade. It's kind of hard to believe it's been that long.
Decade, at least a decade. I don't think I've hit 2 yet.
Yeah, I didn't say decades. I didn't say, there's nobody believe me if I said decades. Any questions from the council? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Are there any speakers on the motion to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the September 18th City Council meeting?
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I really appreciate all the work the EDC has been working on their plan. I do want to bring everyone's attention that I took some time off, spoke at the EDC, and asked them to do a little bit more for small business owners and looking at small business owners. The chamber tends to deal, it seems, with bigger businesses, which is something that is also needed. There's no doubt about that. But there's really no entity supporting the small businesses. And I know a lot of businesses in our community had a really hard year this summer in particular. With the amount of rain we had, when you have 23 days in one month and 21 in another and 16 in another, it really puts a damper for those people that want to walk around downtown and enjoy some of the little shops, the little places you can get tea and coffee. So I would encourage the council to really look at what we can do for small business owners in our community, and maybe even have a lot. I've been doing some research on this, and there seems to be a lot of cities have just a small business component at their city level for small businesses. I personally have 4 small businesses, and I do not get contacted much at all by the city. And I was reached out to one, and I am going to make an appointment. But I think that there's a lot of businesses within our city that are not being supported. And given this time and economic challenges, I would encourage you to ask the EDC moving forward to really looking at some kind of support for our small business group and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other public speakers?
Nope.
Seeing none on Zoom, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional council questions? Seeing none. All right. I'd wait a motion to Pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the September 18th 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second. One of the.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules and bring up third and final reading.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So I would make a motion for third and final reading.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you. Phil? Councilor Denton?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Long awaited.
I motion to suspend the rules to bring forward agenda items number 10D and 11A, 1 through 5.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So what that means is that we're going to skip over the Code of Ethics, come back to that, and we have a presentation from Tom Clausen. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Tom Clausen. I am the city's labor negotiator. I've been doing that for close to 15 years, I think. So I am pleased to be able to speak to you tonight on behalf of the 5 tentative agreements that have been reached with the public safety unions of the city. And I'm going to address the funding issue that relates to those tentative agreements as well. As part of my presentation, I am going to, when I finish, I'm going to ask Police Chief Newport and Fire Chief McQuillan to speak to you very briefly. And I've asked Police Commissioner Shaheen and Fire Commissioner Gamester to also speak to you very briefly. So we have 3 tentative agreements with the the police department unions, and 2 tentative agreements with the fire department unions. The police department TAs call for 4-year agreements. The collective bargaining agreements include provisions that improve the cost-sharing arrangement on health insurance, improve in the sense that they increase the employee's share of the contribution. They include a new parental leave policy. Significantly, they also include language for the body-worn camera policy and implementation of that technology for all employees that it applies to. And they include longer salary schedules that have more steps, but smaller steps. And we'll talk about the financial impact of that in a minute. The 2 fire department tentative agreements are 3-year collective bargaining agreements. They include the same health insurance premium improvements. They also include longer salary schedules and new steps. We modified the way we deal with the paramedic stipend in the firefighter's contract, so it's now built into the wage schedule as opposed to being a separate and standalone stipend in an attempt to try to attract more paramedic candidates into the department. And we've also re-implemented a stipend that had been in prior tentative agreements that related to water rescue training. So the most important question that I think I'm here to address tonight is why are these tentative agreements so expensive? And they are expensive compared to what I have brought you in the past. I acknowledge that. In my memo to you, I called the wage increases robust, and that was the source of the headline in the newspaper, and I freely acknowledge that the wage increases in year 1 of all of these contracts are robust. But hopefully you'll bear with me and you'll understand the reason for that. And I had some handouts that I think we're going to be, so I don't know that you can see this one very well. You can't see the best part of this one, which is a little bit lower.
Give me a second.
So I think in what I tried to do is put in one slide an explanation for why these contracts cost what they do. And I think this slide actually does it. The first red line that you see shows the points. The graph is the consumer price index for the Boston, Cambridge, Newton area, which is the consumer price index that we tend to follow. First red line is where that consumer price index stood the last time these contracts were negotiated. The second red line shows you where we were when COVID started. And then you can see where we've gone from there. In a nutshell, these groups have not had a meaningful salary adjustment. We'll talk about the 4% increase in just a minute. But they haven't had their contracts revisited since prior to the onset of COVID. So that's what these significant, robust wage increases reflect. The 4% increase that the council did last year was laudable, it was farsighted, but it was only a stopgap measure. By no stretch of the imagination did they address the wage inflation that we have seen both nationally and even more acutely in this area. So that's what drives the wage increases that you see in these contracts. But it's more than that. So let me ask you to pull up the second slide, if we could. So when you negotiate these contracts, and the unions have been terrific in coming out tonight to support these tentative agreements, but they're going to hear me say some things now that are going to shock them. I don't want them to listen to what I'm about to say, because I'm going to acknowledge the things that they said at the table. Here's an example of the comparables for the patrol officers, the police patrol officers. And it shows two communities, Concord and Dover. And Concord, not exactly as much as Dover, are very comparable to Portsmouth in terms of size of the department, the number of calls. It's a very analogous comparison. And you'll see that based on the numbers that already exist in Dover, these tentative agreements get our police officers closer, but not even to the same level that Dover is currently at. Again, I don't want them to pay any attention to this because that's not the point, but that's the reality. It's even more acute if you go to the next slide. Actually, this is the actual, this is the backup behind the data that is shown on that previous slide. This is the Dover chart, if you're interested. This is the firefighter wage comp. The same situation applies, that even with these robust wage adjustments, this doesn't get us to the top of where the wages are in the state. In fact, it doesn't even get us to the top of where the wages are in this geographic area, as evidenced by Dover. So you've got the once in a lifetime or once in a generation spike in inflation that we saw as a result of COVID. You've got the reaction of our, I'll call them competitors, because these are the competitors in this area for public safety personnel. And then go to the next slide, if you could, please. Keep going. This is the third factor that played into this. So in addition to the collective bargaining adjustments that these communities made that put them ahead of us, the next 4 or 5 slides show you advertisements that are out there for the same communities in many cases, but many other communities that were, in addition to the wage adjustments they included in their collective bargaining agreements, they were making payments, bonus payments, directly to who? Certified police officers and firefighters who would leave places like Portsmouth and come to them. So the most significant example of this that I found was the city of Lebanon paying $20,000 for a certified police officer who opted to come to Lebanon. So all of this is a long-winded way of saying that the arguments that the union made at the table the unions made at the table about needing to increase wages to retain and recruit personnel, as much as it pains me to admit it, were true and were borne out by these agreements. And they are robust. And they are more than what we have typically presented to you in the form of collective bargaining agreements. These were unprecedented negotiations. And I can tell you that as expensive as these agreements look, I think the unions would acknowledge that they came into the negotiations wanting even more and making compelling arguments for even more. What we ended up with were agreements that were fair, reasonable, and addressed the needs of the city. And I've asked both police chiefs, the police chief and the fire chief, to come here to speak very briefly about how these concerns manifested themselves in the day-to-day operation of those two departments. So I've told them to be brief, but I will ask Police Chief Newport to come up first.
Thank you, Tom.
Good evening. I'll be brief. As I stated earlier, we're in unprecedented times to get public safety officials, whether it's police or fire. These contracts are badly needed for us to be able to continue recruiting and retaining officers. We've been on the live off of our culture in Portsmouth for a long time and been able to recruiting people to come here, but it's gotten to a point now where every city, town, and state is looking for police officers and firefighters, and we're not competitive. And at the end of the day, to live in this area, we need to be more than competitive. I honestly don't believe this contract is even enough. I think it should be more, because we have the best police department and we have the best police officers. So I am advocating for this contract. You see all our staff is here in support of this, and we are asking for your continued support.
Thank you, Chief Newport. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. As Attorney Clausen just laid out for you, right, we've got a significant challenge in the fire department, and we've had some, and you took some steps last year on that 4%, which we're grateful for. But tonight, I just wanted to come here and kind of lay out really where the rubber hits the road, the scope of the problem that we're having in the fire department. And what I'm telling you, all the men and women that are here tonight and back in the firehouses riding the rigs, they by and large tell you the same thing that I'm about to tell you. They may not have the data that I have. Let me just kind of lay it out for the public at home here so that they can understand the challenges that we're facing in this environment that Tom laid out for you all. So in the last 4 years, I'm going to go back to 2019. Our hiring here, we've had 56 qualified applicants that we've brought through the door to offer jobs to and interview, okay? And we've had more of them turn us down. These are active job seekers who have told us no. And by and large, it's because of economics, it's the starting pay. And to dive into that a little bit deeper, to give you an idea, in 2019, we made 9 conditional offers, 5 accept, and of those 5, 2 left for other fire departments. In 2020, we made 7 offers, 5 accepted, 3 resigned, and another one left for another fire department. 2021, we made 9 offers, 4 left for other fire departments after we took them on, okay? In 2023, 8 applicants, 6 interviews, 2 offers, and then 4 withdrew after they were interviewed and given job offers. They declined us. So again, we've hired 28 people in this time, and we've had 30 applicants who are looking for jobs tell us, no, it doesn't work. The numbers aren't there for me to come work in our city. So to take that a little bit further and to give you an idea of what we've had to do, we've actually had to drop our hiring standards back in 2019 to try and attract more people and to try and make it easier to hire folks and then bring them up to speed. It hasn't worked, right? It hasn't stemmed that tide of people looking to go to other fire departments. So when we look at that, and then we look at where we're at with our officer corps, the men and women who are making the decisions, out there on the street for us and making those initial actions and taking care of our firefighter staff and ensuring their safety, right? We have 12 of those folks, and of them, 8 are retirement eligible today.
So if we don't incentivize and find a reason to make these employees want to stay, we're looking at some hard times ahead. So I just want to say thank you for your commitment to public safety, and thank you for your commitment to the city by considering these raises. And again, as Tom said, and as Chief Newport mentioned, we could go further here, right? We're not going far enough, in my opinion. But that having been said, this is a step in the right direction, and this is going to help us get to where we need to be able to answer the calls for service and to be able to make sure that we're attracting the best and brightest and that we're fully staffed. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief McQuillan.
Going to ask Police Commissioner Shaheen to come up, please.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chiefs. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to present this before you tonight. I've sat in your seats. I know this is a tough ask. I know it's an election year and you've got to defend this request and the decisions you're going to make tonight to the taxpayers and the voters at home. And I see this as a tremendous opportunity, frankly. I don't think it's an accident that we're here before you the day after Labor Day, coming on behalf of the men and women who serve public safety officials in this community to suggest to you that if we don't do this today, we are really at risk, not just of not attracting enough people, but of hurting the morale of the phenomenal people we have in the departments today. You know what we all endured post-COVID. These were the folks on the front line getting us through the hard times of COVID. These are the people we need to rely on more than ever moving forward. And we're asking them to put, I think, unduly burdened by what they've had to deal with because we don't have enough talent in the departments to carry the load. I've been through union negotiations now several times in my role on the commission and on the council. I can tell you this is unprecedented, frankly. We are now, for the first time ever in the police department, losing officers to other departments because, as you saw, they're willing to give signing bonuses. And yet, I can stand before you confidently and say this is the best department in the state. This is the best department in the region. So in order to preserve that strength and effectiveness within the department, we need to be able to get these contracts approved. We need to be able to hire the folks that are needed to help carry the load. We saw firsthand the impact of not having enough folks, especially during COVID, especially with National Guard deployments, and then, of course, with illness because of COVID. We can't afford to have the numbers as low as they have been historically. We know we have to have more dispatchers so we can run a dispatch operation that is commensurate with the potential risks people face. So I come before you to ask, knowing that it's not an easy ask, but knowing that, frankly, it should be an easy yes, because we have to do this in order to preserve the strength and capacity of the departments and ensure the public safety for the citizens of Portsmouth. One last comment I would make is that in light of the fact that we haven't been able to hire folks, we've actually returned more than $600,000 just in this last operating cycle back to the city because we haven't been able to staff at the appropriate levels. So when you factor that number in relative to the increase we're here before to ask you to support, to me it seems like a very reasonable request. So I very much appreciate your consideration. We're here to help you make the case to the citizens of Portsmouth that this is necessary and important and we can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaheen.
And Fire Commissioner Gamester.
That last is best?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Richard Gamester. Actually, Chief McQuillan stole some of my facts, but I got a couple on him. I'm going to give you a little rundown of what's happened since 2022. We've had 73 applicants since October of 22. That's almost 2 years now. 19 invited for interviews. 3 accepted jobs. All 3, by the way, have now left. They're gone somewhere else. 8 turned down conditional job offers. 2 no-shows for their interviews. 1 unable to obtain his or her certificate of physical aptitude test certification. 1 did not pass a background check. I don't know where he's working. Yes, today we got a notice of 2 interviews tomorrow for 2 new firefighters, both already certified, ready to go. One withdrew, went to work at Dover. And that's just 24 hours from now. We would have been able to say to him, this is the offer that we have. And since then, 2 additional firefighters have resigned in addition to all that I've just said. Along with all the 6,000 calls that we make each year, people don't think about the other, the work that we perform, such as visiting for the safety of prevention and meeting all bars, restaurants, meeting assembly places, places of assembly, apartment buildings, schools. These all have to be inspected once per year. We have a whole division of people that do that, a division of 3 that do that. Tough job. We've got to be out there every single year, plus do everything else with all the new buildings and the codes and everything else. I know this is a heavy lift, and I appreciate you being indigenous and being able to think about and act upon this thing, thinking of the future of the city of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I speak on behalf of all 5 unions. I'm not just here tonight for the fire. It's everybody here. We're all here for the same reason. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Commissioner Gamester.
So that's the end of our presentation. I don't know if the city manager wanted to speak to the financial piece of this at all, but
I think it would be the appropriate time to take from where you've left off, Tom, if I may, Mr. Mayor. As you can imagine, in the necessary order of business, we need to properly support approval of contracts by acknowledging the need for the supplemental appropriation. And as you can see in the packet, the calculated total first-year cost for the 5 tentative agreements is calculated at $1.464 million. And as you all know, collective bargaining contingency funds were included in the city's adopted FY24 budget, and that number was in the amount of $460,000. But as you know, that number was approved and adopted prior to really even commencing negotiations. So therefore, in working to understand how to meet that gap, we have savings, as previously mentioned, from vacancies and the related benefits that are associated with those positions, along with some achieving the ability to achieve savings in our health stabilization funds for both departments. That has brought the number needed to be identified to support this request to $890,000, and that's why the request is, as you see it tonight, from unassigned fund balance.
Any council questions before the public hearing? Councilor Denton.
I actually have a series of questions for the police chief regarding the body-worn cameras. And this is for the public's benefit. I've spoken to the chief about these prior. And as he's coming up, I want to caveat it with simply body-worn cameras do not capture anything that happens prior to them being turned on. They only catch what's being recorded, not what the actual officer's facing. And I don't know how I would have reacted had anything that transpired in Iraq been recorded and having been second-guessed afterwards. But with that said, Chief, I have 3 simple questions. You could take them in any order that you want. When it comes to the discharge of a firearm, death or serious bodily injury, am I correct that the recordings of the use of the cameras will be kept for a minimum of 3 years?
Yes.
And then, is there a specific Portsmouth policy when it comes to requests for information so the recordings themselves could get out to the public in the Portsmouth policy, or is that a state law that governs it?
We have a policy, but there's also a state law that governs what can be released from body-worn cameras.
And then the final question is, when it comes to the release of any recordings of any of these incidents, regardless if an individual officer or if a member of the union wants to prevent it from being released, do you have the final say as the police chief?
Yes, it's at my discretion.
Thank you.
Councilor Denton. I think we'll open up the public hearing, hear from the public, and continue on with questions.
Yeah.
Good evening again, Rick Beckstead, 1395 Islington Street. I guess pick up kind of where I left off the last time, and again, has nothing to do with union contracts, has nothing to do with a shortage, has nothing to do with encouraging people to come to Portsmouth and work. This has been a problem for years. You knew it when you came in. I knew it over my 4 years. This has been a constant conversation. And that's the part, I guess, that wants to say, I don't break my heart, but you should have been looking at this when you were doing the budgets. You should have been doing this before you hired administrators that sit upstairs, that is in charge of communication, so on and so forth, to be able to go and, I guess, better serve other employees. You know, we added somebody to financing. We added somebody to the, to Kim McNamara's team. We did this after COVID. These were things that we should have been looking at. These are the people that have been here first. I have supported, not only as a resident, but for 4 years, every single contract, deal, vehicle, purchase, or anything else. We've gone and we've asked them to go and hold off on a vehicle, especially when it comes to the police department. We have a lot of vehicles that are here. But at the same time, we should have been looking at this early on, before you passed this last budget and before you even went into the last one. It was a literally yay. You asked questions at the first budget. There were no questions, none asked at the second one. Nothing to go and specifically go and ask, is our IT working? Another $1.5 million into that. That's a 1.4 expenditure right now that would have sufficed all these contracts, and we wouldn't be here tonight. We also wouldn't be here tonight as precedent. This is a precedent moment. This will be the first time in my 10 years, whether being in office or not being in office, that we have ever used unassigned fund balance for this type of an action. To be able to go and have this, it was a one-time occurrence. Used it for a skateboard park. Not really sure where that went. We've used it for vehicles and other things, but they're one-time expenditures, never operating, ever. This will be the first time, and I'm hoping Judy will go and say I'm wrong, and we use it for another time. But in my 10 years, I've never seen this happen before, and how do we justify using it? How do you justify that to the taxpayers? And now the taxpayers are going to be asked to go and suffice the wants and the needs of these departments so they can protect and serve. I've never had the fire department here, except I was 12 when I accidentally set a lawnmower on fire at my house, and they came, and I had actually put it out and was told I did a pretty good job at 12 years old. But I have had numerous times with the police department. I had someone try to break into my house one night, and they apprehended that person. I had a personal item that was stolen from my property. They were there in an instant. We've had several different, whether it would be on the railroad tracks or whether it be on Islington Street where I live, and when you call them, they come. They're there. You're asking the taxpayers, or you're going to have to explain to the taxpayers how you missed this. You have to do it. You have to. There's no question, no choice. But you missed what your number one job was to go and do the right thing when it came to these budgets, to be able to make sure and allocate where money is to be spent and where it's not. And now you're asking the taxpayers to ask for a 1.4, and as I said before, the budget now is almost $143 million. That $4 million is not going to be there next year. Oh, wait a minute, we're going to have a reevaluation. Has anyone paid attention to the reevaluation? Do you know most communities are going up 40 and 50%, and they're below ours? I'm actually thinking it's going to be more like 50 or 60%. And of course, the rate will go down. But you're going to add to the value of $150,000 at my house. And that's just my house. And I'm in a condo, which is not as desirable as a single-family home. And your average single-family home is going to be determined by 57 units that are going to go and determine what the rest of the market is, because it's based on square footage. When it comes to this, everything you say and do, when you go and say we want to create more housing, more density, more population, change the zoning, these people right here protect us every day. The more and more people you put in our community, the more harder their jobs are going to be. Now, we are not, and I will argue literally to the hillside, that we are not a community of 22,000 people. On any given day at the PDA, where they do their job as well, we are anywhere between 50 and 60,000 people a day. That's not the summertime. We can be higher than that. But every hotel, they're there. Every street incident, they're there. A pedestrian needs them, they're there. You need to go and do this. I'm still questioning the unassigned fund balance because it's never been done. Please, from here on out, for the last of your term, when it comes to housing and demand and everything else, think about it. Think of what the consequences are. Bring them in. Find out what it's going to do to our community by going in and adding another 1,000 units, if we could even squeeze it in here without going up 6 or 7 stories. Ask them. They do their job. You guys need to do yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Any other speakers?
Good evening. My name is Liza Hewitt. I live at 726 Middle Road. The way you are spending money, our money, is appalling. I'm not speaking about this union contract. The police have come to my house, the fire have come to my house, and I so appreciate the work that all of you do. I really do. I am talking about the overall budget and how you will fund this contract going forward. You knew when you were finalizing the budget that the negotiations the city was engaged in would add to the budget and future budgets. And yet, when the budget talks took place, there was very little discussion by you. I know, because I was at these meetings. The city council, very few questions asked, no cuts made to the budget to try to compensate for the negotiations that were coming. Shame on you. I have heard city councilors make statements about how here in Portsmouth we expect the best in services. Well, the people that I know in Portsmouth are not eating the best, not driving the best, and not in many cases living in the best. They can't afford it. You, City Council, are spending all their money. This appropriation will be rubber stamped, just as the budget was a month ago, another 9-0 vote. Councilor Blaylock was quoted in the newspaper just last week as saying he understands the impacts the budget has on residents. Quote, I consider myself a blue-collar member of the community, and I'm very aware of the budgets, end quote. If you really believe what you said in the paper, please talk to your fellow councilors and see if they can put themselves on a budget and not spend any more of our taxpayer dollars before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Liza.
Good evening again. Teacher Huda. So I want to say up front, I don't have any problems with the contracts. My questions relate to the question that was asked by our assistant mayor at the last meeting. She asked, what is the real effect on the budget of the contract negotiations or the tentative agreements? Dollars and percentages. And I am going to talk to you about the memo from Judy that was in your packet. I have page numbers so you can follow along. And basically, I am struggling to figure out if her question was really answered by what is in your packet. So the first question I would have is, last year, correctly stated by everybody, we gave an additional out-of-contract increase of 4%. The numbers that are included on the schedule for the firefighters and the police department, the percentages in there are what it says is FY23 base year. What does that mean? Does that mean the budget? Does that mean the 4% was included? You're making a comparison between FY23 and FY24 to answer the assistant mayor's question, and I don't understand what that means. So the question is, was the additional 4% increase outside of the collective bargaining agreement that was put in last year included in this number? Next question is it included in the FY24 numbers that are included in here? So basically, there were step increases last year, and there was also the 4% that was outside of the agreement. So I ask you, do I look at page 50 for the firefighters of 1313 and say their increase was $12.98, or do I add 4%? Do I look at the firefighters that the increase was $13.70? Do I add 4%? I'll go on. I could go on, but I'm not going to dwell on it. So do we really have the true numbers of the increases of the FY24 budget? And the last question would be, what is the final amount to answer the assistant mayor's question of what the budget should have been if you put this in regularly? The last thing I would like to address is something that Mr. Clausen said that I found interesting from a financial perspective. He said that Dover and Concord, everybody's giving bonuses. The difference between giving bonuses and giving percentages of increase is a bonus is a one-time hit. It doesn't go into the salaries and keep being carried on year after year after year as we have here. So I think Dover and Concord, or whoever's given bonuses, is doing the right thing, especially financially, because they're getting the people in and they're not affecting the future budgets. I hope you can answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other public speakers?
Good evening. Buzz Scher, Police Commissioner, 390 Greenleaf Avenue. I've been involved in as many of you know, in the criminal justice system in New Hampshire for over 40 years as a public defender, as a law professor, now as a police commissioner for the last year and a half. And we have a very good police department in Portsmouth. I've seen a lot of police departments. I know bad police departments and I know good police departments. We have a very good police department. So that's a starting point. I was at a body cam national conference earlier this summer, and I was, as we were still engaged in union negotiations, of which I was a part, and I was talking around, there was a lot of police chiefs and deputy chiefs, legal counsel there, and I was asking them, you know, how's hiring going? And everybody, to a person, said the hiring pool has shrunk tremendously over the last 5 years. Things are not where they were even 5 years ago. So it's not just true for Portsmouth, it's not just true for New Hampshire, it's true around the country, point two. Point three, given that, treading water means we fall behind. Even a moderate, what one would view as a more expected or traditional increase in wages as a result of collective bargaining agreements, even a moderate increase would be at best treading water. We'd be falling behind. We'd be less competitive in a very shrunken hiring pool. Finally, we fall behind Dover and Concord because at the salary level, at the wage level, it's not just a matter of bonuses. And that's the nature of the shrinking hiring pool. It's ridiculously competitive. And these increases, even though they're unusual, much more than one would expect to see traditionally, they don't put us at the top of the scale. They don't put us where I think a very good police department should be paying their officers. It puts us at best in the high middle. And we need to do everything we can to give us every chance of surviving in that shrunken hiring pool. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scher.
I don't know if I
Back for another-
qualify as a member of the public, but I just wanted to correct if I misspoke. Concord and Dover are not, to my knowledge, paying bonuses. So there's two prongs to the problem. So you've got communities like Concord and Dover we're losing out to because of the salary piece alone. And then we have communities like Lebanon whose salaries are below ours, but who are coming forward with a one-time $20,000 bonus to entice our people away. So we're getting hit from both directions. And I certainly agree with Ms. Huda that if you could solve this issue and convince people to stay by giving them a bonus that wasn't then compounded into the future, that would be, from a purely fiscal perspective, a better solution. The problem is that, in my experience, and the chiefs can speak to this as well, a bonus is at best a short-term solution. What happens and what is happening across the state is that people are making moves to get the bonus, and then as soon as whatever commitment they've made as a condition for getting the bonus is up, they leave and go to the next place. So I think that I would certainly agree that if you're going to focus on a very narrow aspect of this, bonus would be better than wage increase. But in terms of building and maintaining a department and keeping the top caliber men and women in our departments, a bonus just doesn't do it. So.
Thank you, Tom.
Good evening. Dick Bagley, 213 Pleasant Street. I wasn't going to speak, but I wanted to say at the outset and provide a little rationale. I strongly support the proposal that's been made tonight, that's been supported, that will support our police and fire departments. Not to mention our other groups, our schools, and our people who work around the city all day long and do a fabulous job. I have to disagree with Attorney Clausen in one respect. I've lived in Portsmouth, we've lived in Portsmouth for 17 years. I'm a heck of a lot older than that. I've lived through I was born in World War II. I've lived through the Vietnam War. I've lived through the crisis, the energy crisis. I've lived through the collapse of the stock market. And as the good attorney did point out, we live in a new era. It's an era where capitalism comes ahead of democracy. And capitalism is controlled by politicians, all of which you are. And your job is to look to the safety of your community as first and foremost. It's no different than the federal commitment to having services to protect us. It is job one of every politician. Now, the reality is we live in a brave new world. Yes, there was COVID, but there was also defund the police. There was January 6th. There's half the country goes one way and the other half goes the other way, and there's no compromise in between. We're going to get our way if I'm in my 50%, and you have a responsibility as politicians. The police chief spoke candidly. I was here. I actually served on a commission to help, along with the assistant mayor, to bring in a new member of the board. Joe and Stephanie have done a fabulous job as the police chiefs we've had subsequently in getting us out of the Weber era. We need to stay out of the Weber era. Can you remember when we had people at 1 o'clock in the morning being knocked cold on the streets? Some people died. You know, your father knows, Rich. So there's a reality that we're facing. This is a brave new world that we're going to go through, and we don't know where it's going to go. You have a police department in a building that's causing asthma and other issues. And you have to struggle with how do you come up with 40, 50, 60 million to build a new city hall or a new police station or whatever it is that you're going to decide. But I think the time has come. The UPS did a fabulous job. They did a fabulous job of saying 7.25 is not minimum wage. You can't live in an environment where you're paying 18% on your credit card or more and make it. You just can't do it. So these one-time increases sound outrageous, but you held the budget flat when we first experienced COVID. And I appreciate what Rick is saying, and Rick Beck said, you can see it coming. And I was discouraged when we had to spend all this time talking about pickleball in the tennis courts and not the real matters that carry in and the pollution of South Mill Pond that goes on, our 100-year-old pipes, our infrastructure that's falling apart. But at the end of the day, you have a big job. It was discouraging to hear about Steve Marchand and his antics in the election. Is that going to happen again? You're all going to stand behind that? You were all part of it. You never said a word. In any event, I strongly support. I've lived in Boston, Charlestown. I've lived in New Jersey, immediately outside of Philadelphia. I've lived in California. I've lived in wealthy communities in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts. I can tell you that I'm proud of our police department. I'm proud of our fire department. And I know the city manager has worked hard, but, you know, putting all of the restaurants into the streets makes it really tough for the fire department. Let them have their say. They've done a fabulous job when we had that fire this time on the Piscataqua in an old building. They do a great job. You have great teachers. You have great police men and women. And you have great people collecting trash and doing things that are really important to the community. Pay the people a competitive wage so they could be part of your community and have a chance to share in all of the wealth that you have as city councilors, not because you get a lot of pay, because you get a lot of grief from people like me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick. Any other public speakers, in person or on Zoom? Closing the public hearing. Any additional council questions or comments? Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, if it's all right, I would ask, and if it's okay with the city manager, Judy Belanger to come down and discuss a little bit of the memo that is in our packet that was touched upon answering the question that I asked at the August 7th meeting about the overall projected budget increases for the next few years.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Yes, so I consolidated all of the performers that were presented, and I put some assumptions in here as well of how those numbers were calculated. Again, as Tom Clausen had mentioned, the fire department has a 3-year contract, with the first year having a change in the salary schedule, and then the next 2 years a flat 2% COLA adjustment. The police department has a 4-year contract, again with the first year being the heaviest load, and then the next the 3 years after that, their language still is responsive to the 10-year rolling average of the COLA adjustment, with a floor of 2% and a ceiling of 5%. So in the numbers that are projected here, we use the floor of 2% because we know that that's a given right there. So again, the first year is the highest, but going forward in 25, 26, N27 is in the middle of that memo. There's probably about a $510,000 increase in 25, 370 roughly in 26, and FY27 doesn't include the fire department, so 242,000. So again, when we do budgets, we did include the current salary, which included the 4%, in the FY24 budget going forward. And then we also budget 100% of any vacancies. So we do have some vacancies currently. So, and that's why with the variance for the 890,000, we're actually using, as the city manager mentioned earlier, some of the savings that we were already feeling currently with the vacancies within the fire and police department, as well as being able to probably reduce the health insurance a little bit because they're going to be contributing more. And you know, we're going to revisit health insurance again in FY25. So there is some savings in the health insurance as they increase 1% annually to a total of 18% contribution from the employees. We have used, this is not the first year that we've come back to the council for a supplemental appropriation for collective bargaining. One of the things that happens is that when we are preparing the budget, it is really an unfair labor practice to put a number in which what we, you know, may anticipate what collective bargaining will be without actually negotiations going on. So the number that we budgeted in FY24 was really pretty much consistent with how all the other collective bargaining agreements were, you know, trending. This was prior to acknowledgement of the negotiations that Mr. Clausen has gone through with the unions. So, but we have done this before because of the timing of collective bargaining, and we did that in FY15, FY17, and FY18. Come back to the council at the same time as the council is approving collective bargaining agreements or tentative agreements.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Councilor Morell.
I'm hoping you can expound a little further on the use of unassigned fund balance in order to cover this, and also what happens in previous budgets if, like you're talking about now, we have savings because we have not used it all because we may not have the staff that we're trying to get to, and how that takes a role as well.
Sure. So, you know, every year we have somewhat of a surplus, and in the last couple of years we've had higher surpluses mainly because of vacancies. So there's a revenue surplus and an expenditure surplus. These are all presented in every financial statements that we, all the ACFA reports that are put out annually, and it's a budget to actual. So there'll be, you know, what we budget versus what is a surplus at the end of the year. But when we close that surplus to fund balance, then we have to change that. It's not dollar for dollar because we have to change that to the other financial statements, which is under GAAP. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts that goes on in there because we have other things that close to fund balance as well, like the health insurance stabilization fund, the leave at termination fund. There's also abatement liabilities and that we reconcile to that all affect fund balance by the end of the day. So if there's a large surplus, it may not necessarily that fund balance is going to go up that dollar for dollar because there are other things, encumbrances, and there's other things that take place within fund balance. However, when we also start working on the next year's budget, because of surplus and as we close, we know that we can utilize some of that fund balance or unassigned fund balance, and there's different categories of fund balance. So it's a very kind of complex system that goes on there to convert that into GAAP. But every year in the budget presentations, I always show use of fund balance and how we utilize fund balance. A great rule of thumb is, you know, is to not use it necessarily for operating unassigned fund balance, and it's, you know, used for non-recurring situations like a capital project or so forth. But it's not to say we have never used unassigned fund balance through the budgetary process to help offset taxes. We want to maintain your unassigned fund balance between that range of 10 and 17%. We have been consistently somewhere around 13.5%. We're still in the process of closing FY23 right now, and I feel pretty confident that we're going to end up right about the, pretty flat with FY22, which we were at 13.57%. Total fund balance, overall, we stay pretty consistently with a 40% of appropriations in the last several years. So, when we put together FY24, we did use a little bit more of unassigned fund balance, but knowing that how we were anticipating and what we were trending for FY23.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Councilor Bagley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. And, with these two, I don't have any questions for you, Judy.
Okay.
I'm going to speak a little bit to the appropriation, but also to the contracts themselves at the same time, because they kind of roll together. To the finance director's point, where we set the number for the contracts in the budgets before we even start the negotiations is the absolute floor. So whatever we set that number in, the unions know that's going to be at least that number. So the higher we set that number, the higher we're setting the floor, which is counterproductive. That's the reason things are set the way they are and why we have to come back for more funding. And as mentioned, that's a pretty typical common thing. The other thing that, before I talk about why I think these contracts are essential, I will highlight two, I think, big wins from the city's perspective in these negotiations. And one is that we will now have the ability to have body cameras on our police officers, which I think is something that's required in this day and age. It's just where we are today. And two, we've adjusted year by year over the next the duration of these contracts. We're going to change the insurance split, where our first responders are now going to be responsible for more of their insurance costs. So those are not insignificant things. But to get to why these increases are so high speaks to the quality of the fire department and the police department. Early on in my council term, I got to ride around for a day or so with Brian Rill and his team, Captain Rill and his team, and see how much they do that is not putting out fires. And that's most of what they do. There are our ambulance team. So when you have say you need an ambulance, you have a paramedic or an advanced EMT coming to you. We have 3 ambulances in the city. We have a level of care that we can expect that not many communities have. The other thing that they do a lot of is they're the people who pick up the pieces when things fall through the gaps. So if you're an elderly person and you lose your reading glasses at 2 a.m. and you don't know what to do, you're going to call the fire department or the police department, and they're going to respond and they're going to take care of that situation. So I think there's a lot that they do that kind of goes unnoticed. And I also, a few months ago, did a ride around with K-9 officer Bill Warner and his team on a Friday night. And I'll just give you some of the highlights. We started off the day with doing some traffic speed stops on Middle Road and Beverly Hill Road. Then we responded to the hospital for a rape victim that had nowhere to turn. We then we had a mom call in that was looking for her daughter. Her daughter had some issues and had gone missing, so they put out an APB looking for her car. Luckily, later that evening, everybody was reunited, and it was a good story. Then we had a call to an establishment here in town where there was a threat of a mass shooting event. The entire police force responded to it. Luckily, it was a troubled individual, and everything was resolved without any issue. And then, being a Friday night, there was a lot of patrols downtown, and just making sure that everybody spilling out of the bars, everything went well. And that was just a Friday. There were several challenging, traumatic events that these men and women have to deal with every single time they go to work. They're putting their lives on the line every single time they go to work. And if we approve the contracts tonight, we're going to pay them almost as much as the city of Dover pays them. We're going to pay them almost as comparable cities in the area pay them. And I think that, it is expensive. It is going to cost the taxpayers money. But we have a moral obligation to pay the men and women who keep us safe and protect us at a level that is equal to the care and service that they provide us.
Councilor Bagley, Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. So years ago, when my grandfather, my father's father, was editor of the Portsmouth Herald, so he would write his column every afternoon, and I know there was several years where police activity had gone down. There was less crime in town, so there was some push to lower the police budget. The argument was, well, if there's less activity, then why do they need so much money? He counter-argued with, well, maybe that's because they're doing their job. Maybe that's because we have such a good police department and it's working. I'm so happy he did that back then, because I truly believe that my father and myself were able to grow up in this community that's safe, and it's such a wonderful community because we have the services we do, and we took care of our police and we took care of our fire department. Today, we have that opportunity again. We have been through unprecedented times. I've heard this is a heavy lift. I've heard the words robust wage increase. This is not normal. But we have this opportunity to take care of the people that take care of us and make our city what it is, make it so great. The benefits of a competitive fire department and a police department clearly outweigh the cost that is being put in front of us today. I believe that wholeheartedly. I know if we do not take care of things, the cost in the future will be much greater, and we will all feel that impact, and I do not want to go down that road. I do not want the citizens of Portsmouth to feel that sort of impact. I believe we need to take care of our firefighters, our fire officers, our police officers, and I hope that the council today will do that.
Councilor Blaylock, I need a motion, so I'd wait for a motion to adopt the resolution as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion, Councilor Moreau?
I totally understand this is a really big chunk of change, and it's hard to swallow. But at the same time, based off of what's going on in our world right now, you read, as Commissioner Scher put it, there's hiring issues all across the country. You read about towns that are losing entire departments because officers, both in fire and police, are going other places. So I think if we have the opportunity and the way to be able to make this move and go forward, then I think we have the obligation to do so.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Tabor?
2 points. This is a big amount of money. It's the appropriation is $70 per household. And my 4 years on the council, I've always said the trick is to have our budgets be stable and predictable, move in modest increments as our tax base grows, not go faster than our tax base. But that world doesn't exist anymore, quite honestly. You saw the inflation chart. We've heard the descriptions of the scarcity of good hires. I think Councilor Bagley's told in a way that was really effective the daily work of our public safety people. And what moved me over the line was hearing Chief McQuillan tell us about hiring and losing people, and hiring and losing people, and hiring and getting turned down. And we just can't continue that way. Any organization needs to be competitive in pay to get the best talent and not lower standards, and have people who are skilled and motivated every day. And that's what we need. So I'll vote for this. Last point. If you add this supplemental to the argument that we should have seen this coming, the council voted a 4.5% spending guideline. The budget came in at 3.7%. If you add this, we are at 4.35%. We're within our spending guideline that we as a council voted. Part of that was fire department, which has the largest increases in this agreement, kept their budget very tight. So I do think, given the times we're in and what we need to do for our workforce, and the climate that surrounds us, we're coming in within the spending guideline that we as a council set.
Councilor Tabor. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know how many people here know that my brother was a police officer. He started out his career in law enforcement, and that means he took, he had the worst job where he had to go and check the parolees at night, knock doors, and hope no one was going to shoot him. And it was a really tough job, and my sister-in-law was terrified that something would happen to him. And then in the downturn in the economy in 2008, he was laid off because he was one of the last ones in, so first one out. And he went to work in the private sector, and financially he's probably a lot better off because he went to work in the private sector. And I know my sister-in-law was happy that he didn't have those risks in their daily lives. And frankly, I was happy to not have to worry about him so much. When you take on a public safety job, you take on a lot of risk. And it's a hard job. Being a police officer, being a firefighter, those are difficult jobs with a lot of personal risk. And I know it's hard because you feel like you're at the whim of elected officials who get to make the decisions about whether or not your salaries go up. And that's hard because that's not what happens. It seems like to the rest of society, everyone who works in the private sector, they get their annual increases, they get their annual bonuses. They don't have to be concerned about whether or not who they're negotiating with and who the elected officials are sitting at the desk and whether or not they're going to support that. And that's why it's incumbent on all of us to understand just how difficult it is to work in these jobs and to know just how valuable they are to our community and how important everyone sitting here is to the city of Portsmouth. And for those reasons, I'm definitely going to support this appropriation.
Councilor Cook. Any other comments, questions? We'll need a roll call vote, but I'll share a few words before. There's we heard from a lot of public speakers tonight. Some focused on that should have seen more of a raise coming, and I think we discussed both the labor practices and negotiating practices, the fact that this is not uncommon to have fund balance be used for exactly this, collective bargaining. And so a lot of the public comment, and I'm trying to respond to that a little bit, focus more on kind of budget, budget talk, budget items, maybe less about the police and fire contracts that we have before us. And that's a part of what we sign up for is a budget. That's ultimately the test of council, what we do, what we prioritize, what we spend money on. That's the long and short of it. We talk about a lot of things. To Mr. Bagley's point, Citizen Bagley, we talk about pickleball, but when it comes down to it, the health and safety is ultimately why we form government. In New Hampshire, we have this little thing in the Constitution that we cherish education. So education kind of falls into why we have government. And I was listening to everything, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking about some of the times that I've engaged with our brave men and women of the fire and police department. Obviously, COVID, it was a big deal. Former mayor, I think it was March when we all kind of broke off into Zoom world, but it was really scary. The people that didn't break off into Zoom world are all sitting right here, spent a lot of time responding to calls, putting themselves in danger, getting, one of the things that I remember is there would be people that were looking for vaccines at the time, older people, at-risk populations, and the fire department, man, they were amazing on that. Police department too, but it was just an all-out, all hands on deck. If you needed a vaccine, they were going to get you one, and it was really amazing to watch. And I remember, we'd go out there for healthcare workers. My daughter's banging on a pot at like 6 o'clock, and I was always thinking of you guys when we were doing that. The other thing, when I think of like a really good day, is the first day of school, dropping off, seeing the police presence there. My daughter just gets to know all the different police officers. Some of who have the same haircut as me, apparently, and it's a big day. But the toughest day, probably as a parent, is getting the call that there was a potential active shooter. It's a bad day as a dad, full stop. But I knew that men and women of the police department were going to be there, running into those schools necessary as if those kids were their own, because in a lot of ways they are. You have kids in the public school system, and so that's a really big deal to me. Another really bad day was when my dad. He had a shorter battle with cancer than maybe we thought, and one of the tougher days was he had a seizure and he wasn't able to get up. And our fire department sent an ambulance over there. You never want to go through that, but the grace, and I mean that, I use that word deliberately, the grace in which they got him out, they got him on a stretcher, they calmed both me and my mom down, who would frantically come out. I was actually going to visit him, and she frantically came just banging on my window. The grace that was deployed there was really, it's not something that I'm ever going to forget. And at the end of the day, we're talking about numbers here, and that's what we do. We talk about budgets, we talk about numbers. But at the heart of what we're talking about here is a community that we all love, regardless of what we talk about in terms of budget. We all love this community. And there's a few of us that step up to serve. Some of us are up here. Some serve on the school board, fire commission, police commission. But there's a very, very select few that choose to serve when that means putting themselves in harm's way, when it means going into the building instead of running away from it. And that's what we're talking about tonight. I do believe that we have the financial stability to pay for this increase. I will support these contracts because it is what Portsmouth deserves, because we deserve to have the men and women of these departments feel valued as we all value you a great deal. So, Kelly, could we please have a roll call vote?
Of course. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Tabor?
Yes.
Councilor Denton?
Yes.
Councilor Moreau?
Yes.
Councilor Bagley?
Yes.
Councilor Lombardi?
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock?
Yes.
Councilor Cook?
Yes.
Mayor McEachran?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Yes, we still got to pass the actual contracts.
We just take them in order, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
All right. First up would be approval of the tentative agreement with the Firefighters Association of Portsmouth.
I'd wait a motion to approve the agreement as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second would be the approval of the tentative agreement with the Portsmouth Professional Fire Officers Association.
So moved.
I'd wait a motion to approve the agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Third is approval of the tentative agreement with the Portsmouth Police Patrolmen's Union, NEPBA Local 11.
I'd wait a motion to approve the agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Fourth is approval of the tentative agreement with the Portsmouth Police Ranking Officers Association, NEPBA Local 220.
I'd wait a motion to approve the agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
And lastly, approval of tentative agreement with the Portsmouth Police Civilian Employees Association, NEPBA Local 111.
So moved.
Wait a motion to approve the agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. That does it. We'll take a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to pick up where we left off under public hearings. Public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 8, Code of Ethics, preliminary, Section 1.801, definitions, and Section 1.802, conflicts of interest. And we have two amendments to this, and then a presentation. What do we need? Should we just go? Is the presentation just discussing this? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. First, I want to move to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the September 18th, 2023 City Council meeting. If I can get a second.
Second.
I was just getting the motion on the table so that I could propose the First Amendment. Move that the definition of the term direct personal interest contained in Section 1801K of the proposed ordinance be amended by the addition at the end of the definition of the words or loss at the end. That's 1801K. If I get a second.
Second.
This amendment was raised by Mayor McEachern at our last meeting and drafted by our legal counsel. And so I would ask that everyone support this amendment before we go to the final presentation on the ordinance.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that was actually Tom Neese that was in his email too, so credit where credit's due.
I move that a new section J-E be added to section 1802 to read as follows. J-E, a city employee or official acting in a quasi-judicial capacity shall not vote or participate in the discussion of any matter which would place the official in contravention of any code of ethics provision contained in this ordinance.
Second.
And this amendment came forward to make it very clear that there's a recusal requirement if you have a direct pecuniary interest when you're acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, that you actually have to recuse. Are there any questions?
Councilor Moreau?
I was trying to think about a good example because I think examples sometimes are very helpful. And my 9 years on the planning board during that time, the actual house I live in right now was proposed as a subdivision to be had at the planning board, of which we lived directly across the street, and that made us a direct abutter, of which I did indeed recuse on, and in practice, I did not speak in front of my board on the matter, but I did go and speak in front of the ZBA on the matter when it came forward. So that was, my way of not trying to influence my own board members, but still trying to support the project.
So just I guess a question on that. You would be allowed under this to speak as long as freedom of speech, as long as you are not making the decision, even if you are a member of a board speaking on another board, at another board. So a city councilor, if you so choose, could go speak at the planning board if you're not on the planning board.
Right. Currently I am, so that would be a problem.
Bad
for me.
example.
But any other member certainly could.
I want to just add, it's a direct abutter.
Right, you have to share a boundary.
Yeah, rather than someone that is on the abutter notice of 300 feet.
Yeah.
All right. Councilor Cook, did you want to follow up to that?
I just wanted to clarify for everyone at home that this does not limit anyone's freedom of speech. It just requires them to recuse if they're serving on a board from voting on a matter or discussing a matter if they have a direct pecuniary interest at that board. They can choose to leave the board. And the advice that is given often by our legal counsel is if they do want to speak, they can speak to the issue and leave the chamber, but they can't stay and vote on it, and so that they're not influencing the decision of that board. So that's really the requirement that we're putting in place here.
System Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would just like, from legal, just a legal review standpoint, I know this, I believe, went back to legal after the last meeting, and so whether that is city attorney or of counsel.
Attorney Sullivan worked on this with Counselor Cook quite a bit. I've also looked at it, but Bob might have more insight for you.
Looks like he's prepared to give that insight.
Is there a specific question?
No, I think there was just a question earlier from the public of general legal review, so if we could just.
Yeah, this amendment was proposed by the Governance Committee to make clear that under specified circumstances, the actual act of voting itself could be a violation of the Code of Ethics. And that's the biggest thrust of that provision. I think the example provided by Councilor Morrow is a good example. It was a tricky provision to write because when members of the council vote, for example, you are actually performing the very service for which you have been elected. And therefore, to make it a violation of the Code of Ethics for a vote to take place is something that had to be approached with great circumspection, and I think it was, and it is limited in the way that you read, where that vote would itself contravene some provision of the existing Code of Ethics. And this is an example where, as we heard last time at a council meeting where this was discussed, there might be a First Amendment issue under certain circumstances, but because it's limited to individuals acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, which there are occasions when you act in a quasi-judicial capacity, and it's limited to the direct interest, I think it passes the test constitutionally, and I think it accomplishes the goal sought by the Governance Committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Before we get to the public hearing,
Do we have to vote on that amendment first?
oh, yeah, I guess we do. Sure. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Attorney Sullivan. I have one question before we go to the public hearing. When it comes to the gifting policy of $350, how does this align with our donations policy? Will those donations be, if a city employee is invited for a conference at $350, would that then, or $349, would that then be listed as a donation?
Good question.
Donations are listed, are gifts to the city itself or to some city department or agency.
Okay, so we would list those. I guess, I'm personally fine with increasing the limit, provided that there's transparency in the donation would be listed for, any amount that qualifies would be listed as their grants or donations in a public meeting.
A donation to an individual counselor is not a donation to the city, and it's not something that comes under the donation policy. It is something that would come under the disclosure requirements if the numbers were appropriate.
Yeah, I guess my concern on increasing, well, just any, increasing, what a number has to be a good reason. The reason given is that there's opportunities for city staff to enrich their professional development and careers, as well as attract other talent. And so it's good to have city employees, if possible, go to conferences and have registration fees waived, et cetera. I see that as a positive. Other in the private sector, you're producing something, so there's money that you could, offset that by. In the city, if we were to say no to increasing the limit, then we're saying the taxpayer is going to cover those expenses if we think it's worthwhile to go to these events. I think that as long as we acknowledge that they are donations and should be listed as a donation, then I'm perfectly fine supporting the increase if the effort is to deliver more professional enrichment to our staff, as long as it's listed as a...
Sure. If a private citizen felt that it was beneficial to the city that some municipal department head go to a particular seminar in San Diego, then that would not be that would be a donation to the city, not to the department head. And therefore, it would be handled by the city's donation policy, not by the Code of Ethics gift policy.
Right, but we're just now increasing what can be accepted. And so that increasing puts it over a certain amount, I believe, for the donation, or for the donation policy. Is that right, Councilor Cook?
Yes, Your Honor. The donation policy would require disclosure quarterly from the city manager's office if it was a donation of a $350 donation. So that was in our new donations policy. So we would have to have that disclosure. I should also note here that the governance committee is starting to work on mandatory disclosures in 1901 at our next meeting. So if there's an interest of this council to include even more robust disclosures in 1901, the governance committee can work on those as well, although I should note that we were already intending to work on a more robust disclosure requirement. So,
thanks, Councilor Cook. Any other questions? All right, we will open up the public hearing. Speakers, please rise. 2 for, against proposed Code of Ethics changes.
Good evening, Peter Huda, 2A South Street. Since it's fresh in my mind and you just discussed it, the 350, I would remind the council that for employees, there is a training fund for such training conferences. There's also a line item in just about everybody's cost center for conferences and meetings. So personally, I think this is overkill, and I don't see any reason to increase this. I think it's covered under training in 2 places, actually, in your budget, in each cost center. Something for you to think about. Okay, the first thing I want to talk to you about is number 2, I, J, and K, and this little word that's in there that means a lot, and that word is any. So in the first one, it says those employees or officers who are required by state or municipal law to act in a neutral manner in the performance of any particular function. The suggestion there would be of their particular function. Any is very broad, and it's understood when they take their oath with Kelly that this is what their focus is and this is what their function is. So suggestion there. Next one in number J, first word, any group of people, a group of people. Next one, K, direct personal interest. Down the bottom, an interest in a business for which any action in their official capacity would result in a personal gain. Suggestion there, instead of any, I would say an. Next thing, in number J, actions in a quasi-judicial capacity. So my problem, and I discussed this in the governance committee meeting, and I was hoping that it would be coming out of here, so I will put these questions to you. Number A, quasi-judicial members, and keep in mind, a lot of these are volunteers with specialties in different things, not law. The first one, compliance with all statutes and governing case law. Now, I would ask you, when we have a new attorney, staff member coming in, do they have to know all statutes and case law relating to everything? I would tell you, no, it's impossible. So please think about that when you look at this. The same thing on B, avoiding any involvement in the application in any way. Please think about that word. Officials acting in quasi-judicial shall not speak publicly as members of the public at hearings on issues that are pending before any public board. I would relate this to what Councilor Moreau said. Please change that word. Number D, city employees acting in a quasi-judicial shall not participate in any litigation. The other word in here that could be very confusing and very hard to interpret would be any litigation which involves a person, property, or issue which might reasonably come before that employee or official when acting in their capacity. What does reasonably mean? Does it mean anything? Does it mean everything? How would a person on a board get any idea of that? If it relates to planning, if it relates to zoning, I could understand that, but you have other boards that this might have an effect on. The other thing I would ask you, and this was brought up in the 8-7 Governance Committee meeting, and I don't know where it is, Councillor Cook. This is for council conflict of interest policy. I don't know if this has been shared with you or not, but this was a little, I think you should know, and whoever's going to run here, I definitely think you should know. City councilors should not exert undue influence on quasi-judicial board members in their official capacity, including speaking on issues before quasi-judicial boards that are not related to a direct abutter in interest of a proposal. You can't speak. Is that right? City council members shall not attend other councilors' committee meetings unless noticed in advance or unless they are invited to participate as a guest if their attendance might create a quorum. Same thing here. The council members shall not vote on a matter pertaining to their own personal reputational interest, including issues of ethics and conflict. The thing to think about here is if you're on the ethics committee and you have already voted on an issue and put the issue forward, are you voting twice against the same issue if you vote again? I would ask that, Councillor Tabor. Some things for you to think about on this, because this is going to involve all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. First of all, in looking at and researching in my own situation, I'm not sure why we don't have two ethic policies. One for elected and appointed officials that tend to be volunteer. I know you get a small stipend, but really what you do for hours is volunteer as a counselor. And one for employees. Many places have two policies, which I think would clear up some of the confusion and also would be very helpful, because I think an employee ethics policy, and I know your school already has one, that I don't know if it's conflicted with this policy because I didn't do cross-examination, but I know there's one there. And I also know your teachers have to follow a state ethic policy that is more inclusive than this one. So I truly believe that you really want to look at two policies, one for employees and one for elected officials, appointed officials, and maybe even some volunteers, given some of the sexual harassment, Title IX, and other things that go on that require us for volunteers of organizations to understand. Secondly, I found that I truly believe we should stay with the $100. I feel that you're getting confused with the $350. I think it's very clear for people. And I think anything over $100 could be swaying someone in their actions. So I would encourage you to get rid of the $350 and go with $100, which is also a state. Under JD, that you cannot have litigation sue as a counselor and be on a certain board or thing. I can tell you from experience as a counselor, I had a question with my assessment. I went to the BOE when I was sitting as a counselor. It didn't affect me in my role. However, I did, if you go online, you can see Esther Kennedy versus the City of Portsmouth. And it was over my assessment of my property, which I feel I have a right, whether I'm a counselor or a citizen, to do. And I question whether I could still do that if this policy goes into place. So I'd ask you to really think about what I have as a right as a citizen and what my obligation is as a counselor. I have to ask, in all of this, and what Peter just read, I want to make sure we all have our freedom of speech and our amendments are intact. And I would question some of the conversation that happened at the legislative committee and also what could potentially change. I do believe some of the changes for tonight are significant. And we were trying back there to write down quickly what was being said. And I would question whether I have had my rights or has this document been significantly changed. I would like to know when the document, I would encourage it, and if there's future planning to make some other changes. I have a hard time, like many citizens, of having two partners, spouses, on two significant land use committees. I think that's wrong. I think that we have a counselor and their partner on another committee, on a land use committee. And I would ask you to look at that. I would ask you to really think about the fairness of that. I would ask you to think about whether we are being just in that. I also have been watching you, and obviously, and I have some problems with some of the votes, particularly in outdoor dining. We had people that voted in outdoor dining in February 22nd, 2022, then went into, was benefited by that. And was not only benefited because they were able to seek funds from putting something outdoors, but also partners in their business were benefiting. That needs to be looked at. I would also ask you to look at, in this process, taking donations for dinners and eating. I was told by one counselor that they were given a donation at the 100 Club for food. Where does that fit in your $100 to $350? What is a contribution like that? And I have to question whether that's appropriate. So I have been taken back by some of the votes that people voted on. I believe thoroughly that I watched over the years people when they, like Councilor Moreau said, she didn't vote on her board, but I would ask people to leave the dais, and so that we all know that you're not there to vote and you're not there to speak on the topic. If we're truly fixing this, I don't think we should come back with just half a job, and that's what I see this at. I think you need to do a full job, and let's get it right. Let's do 2 policies, not just one, and let's make truly look at what the state is already doing, because I'm seeing some things that are disconnect between the state and this policy. And so I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to send this back to the Land Use Board and to do their further work and come back with a document that is intact, allows freedom of speech, because there is some questions in this document. I agree with Petra about the any. Those are pretty broad words, and I think we need to get it right. So I would encourage you to do that and spend just a little bit more time on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
I feel like I've been here for 3 weeks. I don't know why this meeting feels like it's going on forever. My name is Liza Hewitt, and I live at 726 Middle Road. Ethics, it's a very touchy subject, isn't it? I've been attending some of those governance committee meetings. I've watched some of them on YouTube, and I heard Bob a lot talking about not encroaching on people's First Amendment rights. So I guess now that I'm hearing what was discussed right here in this moment, I really don't understand what's been discussed at the governance committee. I don't know whether there was a whole lot discussed and then taken back or what, but it seemed like there was a whole lot more of people discouraging people from speaking. And of course, that's where I am here saying that I have some real concerns about that, if that is how this is all headed. So, as a resident, I've observed, during this council's term, a number of incidences in which members of the council have sought to silence members of the public and discourage that robust resident involvement. And I really hope that that is not where this is headed. Just want to make sure of that. Now, that's not what's being portrayed here, but it's more what I heard in those governance committee meetings. So I just want to make sure that all of this is out in the open, and that what you're saying here is really what you're meaning here, and that maybe some of what was said in the governance committee kind of got retracted and was not put into this ordinance. The other area that I too have some questions about is this whole family members on opposing judicial boards. So, maybe it's the wording of the way you've written this, but I read section 1.802J(C). I took this from the ordinance that you're proposing. Avoiding any involvement. So let's just say we say a planning board member avoiding any involvement in an application when a family member, which could be somebody on another, like a ZBA, is participating in any way in connection with the application presented. So that would pretty much be almost anything that went on in those two meetings. Somebody is going to be, you're going to be discussing or involved in that application. So to me, that right there says you can't have two members of a family on opposing boards. So if you feel that it's okay to do that, I think you should look at C, because to me, and Bob will know far better than I will because I'm not a legal person, this says that can't happen. So I would just be, make sure that you're reading this all the way through, and that you're, looking at this as it not only relates to others, but as it relates to yourself on the city council. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Dick Bagley, 213 Pleasant Street. I've mentioned that I've been here for 15 years, and part of that time I spent as president of One Sky. And what astounded me at the time is the state of New Hampshire requires nonprofits to have a whistleblowers policy, and we don't have one. So we didn't have one at One Sky, and I talked to John about that extensively. And of course, nobody wants a whistleblower policy. It's controversial. It's like cameras with policemen. Everybody has a point of view. But we had to put one in place. And it was very effective. When you think about councils, city councils at the government level, and officers and directors that work basically for the city, as opposed to quasi-judicial committees, which is a very different situation. So I'm totally confused, and Bob confuses the hell out of me, because in all 15 years that I've been coming, at the beginning of the council meeting, somebody's supposed to come and say, either in a city council meeting or in a quasi-judicial committee, I'm going to recuse myself because I have a conflict of interest. It always gets to the point where somebody in the audience says, isn't there a conflict of interest? And then Bob raises the issue, and every time the answer is no, because of the definition of pecuniary. What is pecuniary? So I mentioned the assistant mayor, there was a controversy because she ran a coffee shop. Did she have a conflict of interest because she was in a business? And Bob said no, and it makes sense. That's not a conflict of interest. The idea of pecuniary is money's going to go in your pocket, and that's pretty hard to prove or define. So I'm for and against what you're doing. Clearly, the Ethics Committee was operating with the mayor and the city manager making decisions on ethics, and then having a quasi-judiciary committee. You remember, John, you had to run one of those. And if you listen to that committee deliberations under the rule of law, that was an abomination. So I'm for this idea because I think we need the city council and the political world in which we live, and the money-dominated world in which we live, to have a better ethics policy, and this goes a long ways to addressing that. But I think the idea of going to $350, I'm totally confused. So I'm on the council, and I go to my favorite restaurant, and for $349, my favorite restaurateur who loves me because I support him when I go to the, that's not reportable? So I could go out to dinner every night on the city council and never have to report anything. Or for that matter, I could go into a shop and say, geez, I really love that. Well, you're a city councilor. Or I know I'm focusing this on the city council, and I'm not intending to do that. The same thing would be true if you were an officer of the city. So it seems like Bob's worked long and hard at this, but the problem is the definition. Good lawyers can get around anything in politics, no matter what you do. I'd love to see the city have a whistleblowers policy, because that puts the workers in the role of understanding what actually goes on. And if it's required of nonprofits, why isn't it required of the city? And I'd love to see us stay at $100 because it's simple. Restaurants do what they do, and what's a big deal about $100? $350 is a little different. Gifting. Look at the Supreme Court of the land of the United States and what's going on there. We live in capitalism, where the only thing that matters is what you can get. So I implore you to think about the language and use the best language you can to define in a quasi-judicial committee. What difference does it make if you get up and speak? What makes a difference is how you're influencing the decision that's judicial. It's binding on the parties. That's a legal binding obligation that you have. And that language, as has been pointed out, is still a little confusing. Bob, I'm sorry to say that. And I know he believes that the First Amendment right is important, but your federal legislatures, they can throw you off a committee. They can do whatever they want, and they don't worry about the First Amendment right. So the difficulty is what happens at the federal level, what happens at the state level, what happens at the city level. It's not consistent. We have our RSAs. They're very complicated, and they apply to us. But then there's us in the profit world, and there's us in the nonprofit world. So I think you need to work on that language. Not that it's bad. it's going in the right direction, but it needs some help with regard to quasi-judicial committees. Stay at $100. Who cares whether you get $100 in coffee or whatever? It doesn't matter. What matters is the perception that you could be influenced by getting $349 under an ill-defined policy as to what actually is this, as already been pointed out. Is that a contribution? If I get $349 for a meal, is that for the city or is that for the individual? It's not clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick.
Apologize for some of the statements that I make. When you get to be my age, you stand on principles and you never get off them. It's a big mistake I have. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other public speakers here or on Zoom? I will close the public hearing. Any additional questions? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to give some clarifications following the hearing just to make sure that everyone at home understands how this was written. Specifically, there was a concern about whether or not, if you were serving on a quasi-judicial board, you could still sue, for example, the city around your assessment. And Section D was written very carefully with that exact issue in mind. Council Sullivan was really careful here to make sure that everyone can still, exercise their rights around their own property, and you can engage in litigation. The key thing here is that you recuse yourself and you don't participate in the discussion. So I think that that's really what's critical, and what we're trying to emphasize throughout this whole section is that if something is coming before you that you have a direct interest in, and we've defined here pecuniary interest and personal interest, that you're supposed to recuse yourself and not participate in the discussion with your board. And when we talk about quasi-judicial boards and acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, that isn't a huge number of council committees. That specifically is our land use boards and sometimes the city council when acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. So I think that's also important to remember here. So most of these standards go to meet the guidelines that are already given to members of our quasi-judicial boards before they start acting. Also, it's also critical to know that state policy does apply here. We are all beholden to state policy, and state policy is extremely robust, especially around gifts and how that has to be disclosed and when that has to be disclosed. So whenever we write ordinance at the city, it's always to complement what we have in state law, because we can't go further than state law. We have to have enabling state law, but also we are subject to state law because we don't have home rule. So just note that this is just very supplemental to what is already there and what the requirements are. And I love the suggestion of a whistleblower policy. It's not here in our conflict of interest policy. That would be a separate policy for the council to ultimately consider. We are really just dealing with the provisions of conflict of interest in the ethics ordinance. So.
Councillor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll address a couple of the public comments because I think they may have been directed in my general direction. When I did the dining challenge, I was not a city councilor, and for the vast majority of it, I was not either a candidate. So getting one free meal out of, it was over 200, because I wasn't a member of the club, I don't think affects any of the votes I've had here on the council. I actually go to great lengths to try not to get any free food or beverage, so much so that the coffee shop I visit most downtown is Cafe Von Sollen, and they have the buy 10 coffees, get one free. And I don't even participate in that. So I do take exception to this perception that somehow we're up here volunteering our time so that we can get a free meal every once in a while. That being said, I do think this ordinance, I admire the work that was put into it. It's just got too many hurdles for me to overcome. I think the ultimate test is every 2 years at the ballot box on whether or not people are being ethical, and therefore I won't be supporting it tonight.
Councilor Moreau and Assistant Mayor.
Thank you. I was hoping to kind of ask the committee, one of the things brought up, compliance with all statutes and governing case law, and as an attorney, yet no one ever knows every statute or every governing case law, but knowing where to get it. So I was wondering if maybe language that might be a little bit more to point would be compliance with all applicable statutes and governing case law, so that it would be applicable to those specific applications and cases. So feedback on that. And then my second question to any committee members was whether or not they did look at the possibility of splitting this into multiple policies or not.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm happy to ask our legal counsel of Council Sullivan to come back up to answer your first question, because the draft language came through the legal department. I should note that all the language here was not only reviewed by legal, but drafted by the legal department. As to the second part of your question, we had that discussion in the governance committee around the fact that this applies to everyone in the city. And the general advice we received from the legal department was that this has been working. There's nothing wrong with our ethics policy. We have already fixed some of the challenges as a council last year in the way it's implemented, and we're just trying to fix also some challenges around the conflict of interest section in particular. But in the past, our policy has worked as intended, and so there's not a need to alter it or create a separate policy. It is very difficult, I should say. It is cumbersome and difficult, and it's harder on our legal counsel in having to be very careful about how they draft the language to make sure it applies reasonably to all.
The provision which was put into issue by Councilor Moreau says that it is a violation of the Code of Ethics for anyone acting in a quasi-judicial capacity for the city. It requires that they maintain compliance with all statutes and governing case law. Now, all that really means, if you think about it for a second, is that in addition to breaking state law, if an official acting in a quasi-judicial capacity does so, they're also violating the Code of Ethics. It doesn't create any new obligation at all on those individuals. It creates a new enforcement mechanism should they violate the state law.
A follow-up question, not on that specific act, but since I have you here. It was brought up about having members on separate boards, and it was always my understanding we're not listening, even though it might be the same project. Our applications that go between different land use boards are completely unique, and that there's no real carryover from one application to the other.
I think that's accurate.
Thank you.
Councilor Lombardi.
There was also questions about the $350, raising that, and the implication that came from some of the input was that that was a number that could be donated to a city councilor, and that's just not the case. The city council is still at $100 for a donation to be reported.
Well, the actual provision reads that it is only a violation of the Code of Ethics to accept that $350 gift from someone who has an interest or reasonably would be expected to have an interest in city business. So a person could go to the finest restaurant in the city with their spouse every night of the week, and the restaurant could comp that bill, and it would not in any sense be a violation of the city's Code of Ethics unless the restaurant had an interest in city business. And if the official, city official, such as one of you, felt that was the case, you should not accept that gift if it's over $350, should the ordinance pass.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I really appreciate what our legal counsel just stated, because that is extremely clear in state law, is that if a friend, a close friend, buys you dinner, that is not a gift per this ordinance. And we can't go beyond what the state law defines as a gift. So I think it's really critical when you go back and you read the state law to see that we are limited in what we can also limit.
I think that, so just on the, sorry, Assistant Mayor.
It's okay. I was just looking for clarification again from the committee. I also am struggling with this increase from 100 and 358, and so I guess I'm just looking for more clarification of why you feel. I understand. I'm not sure I feel it's enough to. It feels to me, and it sounds to me, and how I'm understanding it, that it's kind of to ease, right? That it's to make the process easier for staff, or for a retreat, or for a donation policy. But I guess I'm wondering in how many instances would this have alleviated any confusion in the past? Have we looked back at donations that have been made to city staff or to councilors to see that this would be relevant and need to take effect?
And I guess further, like a question, there's a donation policy for the city of Portsmouth. So the city of Portsmouth, as Councilor Sullivan earlier stated, would be the recipient of those donations, not an individual. So the individual, like, how aren't we as councilors the only ones affected by that? Like the city, like if, Peter Britz was asked to speak on climate change, and they waived his speaking or his conference badge of an amount of $400. That would come in as a donation to the city of Portsmouth, correct?
That is the way I would view it, Your Honor.
And so not applicable to the
Not
$350.
Your Honor, likewise, we would also want to make sure, though, that if we had a city councilor who did not have considerable means, and they were offered an opportunity to attend a conference that they could not afford, that they would not have to reject that possibility, especially if it was related to their work on the council specifically, and the conference fee was $150 or $200. You want to be really careful, because the way it's written now is that they just absolutely have to reject that and say, no, I won't attend, even if it's relevant to me, unless the city decides to pay the honorarium for them to attend. So there are some challenges here. The goal is to make sure that all of those things are disclosed in 1901, the disclosure requirements. So, and the way that legal counsel explained it to the governance committee was that this number has not changed since the original adoption of this ordinance, which is over 40 or close to 40 years old, 35 years old or so.
Definitely over 40.
Over 40 years.
I guess to that point, Councillor, as elected officials, some people do fundraising, and you would just have a donation based through fundraiser, and then any donation over $100 you would then declare. Is that not? Would that not be the? I guess to me that's the way that this would work, which then again removes the need for that concern in the adjustment of this policy. If someone donated $150 to me to go to a conference, I would then disclose that during my term.
I think they are separate matters. What you have to disclose is handled under the disclosure provision of the ordinance, however that ends up. What you can accept or not accept is handled here.
Okay.
And if the ordinance should pass as proposed, you should not accept a gift over $350 unless it's a campaign contribution.
That's crazy. unless it's campaign contribution. Counselor Cook.
I think it's also important to note that the city's policy has been to err on the side of caution and to just not accept anything over $100.
What do you
Or
mean?
even for employees, is my understanding, is that in the past, in order to avoid any potential accusation or criticism, the city's policy has been to err on the side of caution and abide by this $100 limit, even for gifts that go to the city.
Okay. I mean, I think that this is, we're seeing, I think, the limitation of having a council policy and a city policy, but I'm not necessarily convinced that, I understand it for the staff, although now realizing that we can simply declare the donations under the contribution limit, it seems like the staff argument is not necessarily as pressing, since there's a mechanism, and we'd want those to be acknowledged if we believe that there is a conflict or a perceived conflict. So then it just is focusing on the city councilors, and so we would effectively be raising it for our own from $100 to $350 since it's already covered in the staff. And that seems like, it's probably not changed for 40 years because it's pretty tough to, all of this is self-reporting, and all of this is creating a sense of trust through the rules that we're following. And I think that it would, and it's a complicated document because it takes into a lot of account, and it takes what is possible under state law. But if we're just increasing that amount for individuals, that might give the impression that, this is increasing what we could accept when the original intent, I believe, was for staff. Councilor Cook?
Your Honor, the intent was for staff, but I should note that it's not just city councilors that this applies to. It also applies to all members of our land use boards, all volunteers for the city. So, for example, if you had a new chair of your zoning board or a new chair of your planning board, and they were to be sent to a conference where they had to spend the night in Manchester for training, and they essentially were accepting the gift of training. If we limit to $100, how do they go and attend that training if they don't pay for it themselves? And what if that training is critical for their work as a chair and their training to be chair of a planning board or zoning board? So the reason that we changed that limit is because costs have changed in the last 40 years. When the intent of the ethics code, when it was created over 40 years ago, that $100 was a lot more money 40 years ago. So the reason we went to $350 is we looked at approximately what it would be like nowadays, that $100 in today's dollars, to make sure that we were keeping with the original intent of the Code of Ethics.
Councilor Tabor, first bite of the apple, and then Assistant Mayor.
Question for City Attorney. If we wanted to amend this to go back to $100 tonight, where would that, is that a minor enough change that we could still vote this?
I don't think so. It's really a judgment call, but that's a substantial change from 100 to 350, and if you're going to go back,
Okay.
you're declining really to approve the amendment, right? So you'd be declining to approve the amendment to 350
Yeah.
per calendar year.
Okay. I mean, this is, for me, this is discussion that looks at this question from a number of different angles, from Council Moreau's land use board example and from some of the other examples we walked through. I'm warming to the idea of going back to $100. As the mayor says, we've got a procedure to report gifts. And let's remember, this is from businesses that are doing business with the city. So, you know, an auditing firm may say, well, we'll give you a week of training and we'll make it for free. Or a geotechnical firm could say, we'll give you an environmental engineering seminar, but we'll give it to you for free. And they're doing business with the city. So if we can't make that as an amendment, I'm going to move that we take this back to the governance committee, and if I get a second, we'll vote that.
Second?
Anybody else have?
Counselor Cook, the alternative would be to make the amendment and it comes back at second reading that would be that's the alternative, is we make the amendment, we have a public hearing again at the next meeting, and we discuss it. Doesn't have to necessarily go back to the ethics.
Okay.
Governance committee. We're almost at 10:30, guys. Counselor Cook.
I think it's also important to remember that when we talk about in business dealings with the city, we live in a fairly small state. So we would be talking about excluding any like New Hampshire Municipal Association training, training from the state planning. You know, like we have memberships at the city level in all of these organizations across the state. And this would essentially prohibit anybody from receiving training that cost over $100.
I would pose this question, and I don't expect an answer from you, Councillor Cook, or an answer from the city manager or city attorney tonight. But my question is, how many times has this scenario happened? That a gift of over $100, whether it's a form of donation for a association meeting or travel, how many times has that had to be rejected? Or are we trying to solve for something that just is not a relevant issue? Understanding that the idea is that yes, the costs have increased, things have increased, but are we saying no to things because of the current policy? I guess would be a question that I would like to hear back at some point before I would feel comfortable voting on an increase.
I can answer for myself.
Yes.
Which is that no one has ever offered me more than $100 gift.
It's one out of 700 and
900. So I had a motion to take this back to governance, which had a second. I'll withdraw that motion and move that we change the gifts and favors in section 1.802F back to $100 and bring this back for second reading. If I get a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think I'm comfortable. I mean, I'm comfortable with $100. What I'm not comfortable with is that the fact that somebody has to reject the opportunity outright, especially when we think about individuals that serve as volunteers on all of our boards and even council members. I don't want somebody to be excluded from training or a training opportunity because they can't afford personally to pay for it.
Councilor Moreau.
To talk from experience, having spent 9 years on the planning board, every year it was offered up to all members of all land use boards to attend an annual conference that's put on by the state agency that's in charge of planning. It's changed names so many times, I can't keep it straight anymore. So, and I've partaken in that many times. But it's always been something that the planning department would put out to us and the city would actually pay for. So I'd pay my own gas to drive out there. It was just be a one-day thing. But it would only take, my ability to get to the conference and get back. Other than that, your conference fee also pays your food for the day. So I guess I don't think it's a problem because we do have these budget line items that typically if somebody wants to go somewhere or really needs to go somewhere for staff or for volunteers. And it's also, I think, through the Municipal Association and through our local planning commission, we also do offer a lot of free training where they'll come in and actually, we've had it several times at the planning board where they've come in and talked to us about specific issues that new members might have questions about. So I think all of those are allowed now, and I guess I don't see a problem from my point of view.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just think it's really important to highlight that some committees are given those opportunities, but not all committees. Different committees have budgets and others do not. So, so that's a really important issue to think about. For example, the new Arts and Cultural Commission does not have a line item of funding. And if they want to go, anyone wants to go receive training, they would be at the whim of whether or not could be found somewhere in a budget, or they would have to pay for it themselves. So I think it's important to remember that not everyone is the same at the city. The city employees are usually paid for, but not all volunteers receive those same benefits necessarily. So that's why I would want to be careful that we make sure, if we go back to $100, that we make sure that there's a provision for you can accept more than that with certain disclosure requirements. Like, so it's not that I'm concerned about that I want people to be accepting $350 and not telling anyone. It's that I want to make sure that there's a provision for that, for them to accept that from the city and disclose it in one way or another.
That could probably be a good way to, disclose anything over $100. Seems like it'd be a reasonable solve for that. But we have a motion on the floor. It was seconded. Councilor Bagley to the motion.
I just want a motion that we go past 10:30.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No. Okay. So I think it might be a different, it could be removed back to 100 or just a disclosure appointment. My concern with the disclosure is that it's going to sounds super simple to do right now, and I'm guessing that it could be. I doubt that we're going to get it right on the first pass. So if that would come up in the future, that might be, there's other things that need to happen with the ethics. It might just take the perfect out of the way and focus on the good that's here and solve what we're trying to solve for. Reasonable asks to go to, from our board members that want to be able to participate and enrich their experience. We should solve that separately. All right. So we have a motion on the floor to revert to the $100 language. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we will have to vote to schedule second reading again for the city attorney. So I'd wait a motion to reschedule second reading at the September 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. On to city manager's items which require action, number 6 through 8.
Your Honor, tonight we are requesting first reading to amend various sections regarding Chapter 7 relative to snow announcements, and Parking Director, Division Director Ben Fletcher's here. He's not prepared to make a presentation tonight. He would If this were to pass, he would make a presentation at the next council meeting. But the effort here is to streamline how we message things and to be mindful of how residents in our community get their messaging, and we are very sensitive to that. Essentially, this would modernize and put in fewer places where the live updates live and put in broad places where to go find the live updates. And it would promote the use of the Smart 911 system. So the request of the council would be to schedule first reading for these amendments at the September 18th council meeting, at which time Ben would make that presentation.
Okay. I'd wait a motion to schedule first reading for amendments to Chapter 7, Article 3, Section 7.321, Snow Emergency Parking Ban, and Article 10, Section 7.1002, Snow Removal Operations at the September 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
I just want to briefly state, I'm one of those people that does not use social media like most. It's never been something I've thought to do. But I did sign up. I am signed up for the Smart 911, so I get text messages and voicemails from, their robocall that calls me and lets me know when things have been canceled or when things are being enacted. So I do think that we have it in enough mediums for all different types of folks that it does indeed work. At least it's worked for me.
And the signage doesn't just mean at City Hall, right? Continues to mean all of the guys that go and gals that go out on the snowbanks, specifically for haul outs where they're out with the pickets and they're putting those in, picking them up. Okay.
Correct.
Assistant Mayor, that was it?
You
That was it?
covered
Yeah.
the base.
All right.
Your Honor,
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that we will be discussing this at the this
PTS.
Thursday's BTS
Oh.
meeting at 8:30 in the morning. So if people have additional questions, they're welcome to come and listen in on that.
Great.
Thank you for that. I meant to mention.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Number 7 would allow the city of Portsmouth to join many other communities in New Hampshire to formally recognize that we would provide mutual aid and assistance to our fellow communities. We do that on an informal basis now, and if we were to agree to this and agree to pay the annual cost of $25 a year, the provision of that funding is voluntary, by the way. The idea is we help our fellow communities and they help us. This is a means to allow the city to access a larger group and to show our support in a more regional approach to providing assistance. So this is long overdue, and we're excited to formally ask for your support in joining this effort.
Wait a motion to adopt the New Hampshire Public Works Mutual Aid and Assistance Agreement as presented and authorize the city manager to name the Director of Public Works as the authorized representative to execute
So moved.
the agreement.
Second.
Councilor Morone.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. In thinking of this, so I know that we're working on the emergency water line between like Dover and Portsmouth. Would this be one of those many things that could be done in emergency cases for mutual aid? Is that the kinds of things we're talking about?
That's more a planned project. This is more unplanned or a true emergency where there's a call out for help. And right now, we certainly provide that help, but this would formalize and publish that we are available to other communities for that effort.
I get
Less so a planned capital project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Lombardi.
Yeah, I read through this agreement. I was actually surprised that we don't already have this. And so I think this is an important agreement to collaborate with our neighboring communities.
I would commend DPW Director Peter Rice and Senior Assistant City Attorney Jane Farini for working on this together.
Wonderful.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I also commend our senior staff and the city manager for bringing this forward. There has been a long tradition of mutual aid on the seacoast in New Hampshire. The one caveat I provide here is that I want to make sure that because we are one of the larger communities in our region, that we don't become responsible for bearing the capital costs of having assets that others do not have.
Correct. We will be mindful of that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Just had to remember if we had the motion, and we did.
We did.
We did have it that time.
Last item is relative to the disposition of 15 used vehicles, and they're all within DPW. 3 are due, were budgeted for and due for replacement in the FY23 budget. 12 are in the current budget. And as a reminder, anything that has a value of more than $500 per our purchasing manual needs to come to the City Council for approval. So we're looking to include these vehicles that are no longer of service to the city to be part of the trade-in value when we acquire replacement vehicles.
I'd wait a motion to authorize the Department of Public Works to dispose of the used vehicles identified through the trade-in process as described in the memorandum.
So moved.
Oh, second.
Councilor Moreau, you're
Sorry,
earning
I
your
know,
keep here.
I feel like
you
I'm
know?
full of questions today. Out of pure curiosity, have we ever tried, instead of trading in or getting trade-in value, are we selling these outright, or are we truly trading them in for new? I guess I was just wondering if the value would be any different if we did it one way or the other.
We've tried it both ways, and it's my understanding that this is a more cost-effective way to dispose of the vehicles, and that on the hope that you might have a one-off on one vehicle, this has provided a historical means to gain more value.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now that Councilor Moreau asked that question, though, so the market for used cars has changed somewhat dramatically over the last. Do we still expect that those prior trends to be the current environment?
I believe the answer is yes, because of the specialized nature of the vehicle, but Director Rice is here, and I don't know if he wants to weigh in.
No, I think that the specialized, okay. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it's important that we do trade these vehicles or receive value for them, clearly. But my question pertains more to what we're purchasing and moving towards a model in the future of having a purchase price for a standard vehicle versus a purchase price for an electric vehicle, replacement vehicle, and allowing the council to look at the comparisons between a gas or diesel vehicle and an electric vehicle in making decisions. So.
It's Peter, come on up, but it's my understanding that especially with some of the heavier equipment, there is not the technology in the industry to support electric heavy equipment, but I'll let Peter speak to that.
So actually, I just attended a seminar on electric vehicle transition for DPW fleets, and the challenge is the production of electric vehicles is more towards the sedan and smaller pickup. So the larger vehicles, they're not really there yet. And the other thing that you need to be aware of, when it's more expensive to buy electric vehicles, but if you use them a lot, the life cycle cost is better. If you have a bunch of sedans that are not being used a lot, you just spend a lot of money and you're not seeing that recovery of cost associated with that. So, I mean, we look at this and we look at the other things we look at is, how do we, if we're doing an expansion in an area, make sure we have provisions to be able to provide electric charging. We're thinking about alternative means of charging at the library because they're looking to purchase an electric bookmobile. So it is something that we're aware of and we are paying attention to. The cost differential, I don't have it at my fingertips at the moment.
Thanks, Peter.
Councilor Cook.
Yes, thank you so much for the explanation. I'm just saying that down the line, we need to start thinking, especially as the climate action plan is coming, about providing those when available, the cost comparisons so that the council can help make that decision on what's most reasonable.
I agree. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're on to the consent agenda. I'd wait for a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
And just to highlight the Music Hall's annual Telluride by the Sea Film Festival, September 15th to 17th, and then October 12th through Sunday, October 15th for the New Hampshire Film Festival. And then this is coming up pretty quick, the IGOT Bridge, September 10th, walkathon. So both of those will refer to the city manager with authority to act. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I'd wait a motion to accept and place on file email correspondence.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up is a letter from Paul and Allison Dune requesting permission to build a floating access dock near the existing stairs located on Pierce Island. This wait a motion to refer to legal department and the Public Works Department for the report back.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Memorandum for the Greater Portsmouth Recovery Coalition summarizes the progress of the coalition. It's in the packet. A good read. I'd wait a motion to accept and place on file.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On to the council. I'd ask the following appointments to be considered. Jen Skumaki to the EDC. Erica Wygonik as a regular member. She's currently an alternate. Worked on that committee for a long time. And then Dave Allen to replace her as alternate to the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee.
You had one more.
One more.
You're missing one.
You're on
Larry.
Larry Booz to the Historic District.
District Commission.
I left that off. I apologize
Yeah,
on the.
no, that's right. Larry Booz. Hey,
Look,
Reed was. Yeah, had
We're
a
all
great
waiting for that
conversation
one
with-
more.
Yeah, well, I would. You guys printed out
As
the.
well you should.
The yep, and Larry Booz to the HDC. Councilor Denton and Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to schedule a first reading on September 18th, 2023 of the draft ordinance establishing a sustainability committee.
Second.
And if everyone recalls, several months ago, we brought forward a very similar looking ordinance to codify the current Blue Ribbon Committee on Sustainable Practices. It was sent over to the Governance Committee. The primary changes here include when it goes into effect and how the chairperson would be chosen. The chairperson, all our ordinances, all of the committees by ordinance now select their chair at the first meeting in January. This is now reflective, and this would take effect in January if passes, opposed to when the Climate Action Plan is adopted.
So did we get? It's first and second. Councilor Cook.
The Governance Committee did a quick review of this and sent it back to the Sustainability Committee. I think the Sustainability Committee did a great job of reviewing their draft again and making some final decisions on what they thought was best to move forward with.
All right. Look forward to the discussion on the 18th. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Councilor Cook, we had yours.
Mine is already covered.
Done.
And we will, yep, and we will come back to it next week. And then approval of grants and donations, acceptance of the Forensic Shield Grant for the Police Department, New Hampshire, Internet Crimes Against Children, ICAC, the ICAC Task Force in the amount of $1.3 million. I'd wait a motion to approve and accept the grant as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The city manager's informational items.
We have three quick ones this evening. First, we'd like to promote a presentation we're calling Wastewater 101. We're looking to bring the community up to speed on all things wastewater, current system, status of regulation, system performance, current challenges, upcoming projects. That will take place a week from tomorrow night, September 13th at 6:30 at the library in the Levinson Room. Second announcement would be relative to Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day, taking place on September 23rd. That is a week from Sunday. As you know, we support not only residents in Portsmouth, but also Greenland and Newington, and that's between 8 a.m. and 12 noon. And the third brief update is the long-awaited second survey to come out on flash vote is hopefully going to come out next week. Monty is pressing for that, and it will come out either Monday or Tuesday of next week. And it will relate to parking and specifically to the residents' needs and desires of parking as it relates to Park Mobile and how to better utilize that. So it's going to be specific to parking for residents and familiarity with the current app. And the topic number 3 is looking to be in support of the Climate Action Plan in October.
Right. Anything under miscellaneous? Councilor Moreau.
It's keeping me awake. It was brought up earlier about access to the air show. For those that don't know, the air show is supposed to take place this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. There's 2 full days, but they do have access points for Uber drop-offs, for bicycles, for walk-ins. They have a whole section because they realized after the last air show that was kind of fell through the cracks in their short-term turnaround, but there is a full plan for that, so I just want to make sure that the public understands that they can get in.
Romeo was convincing. They changed it all. That's awesome.
So they've got it. It's all such a, and I've seen it on a map, but I couldn't tell you where it is right at this moment. But I'm sure somebody will be there to direct you. They have hundreds of volunteers and lots. If you're stuck in a faraway parking spot and you're handicapped, if you can get towards a gate, they will have people driving around golf carts, trying to drive my little golf cart, like 8-person golf carts to pick people up and to get them where they need to go, so that they're making it more handicapped accessible as well.
That's great. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to tell everyone the new turf field at the high school has been finished. We have 118 football players at the high school level practicing on playing on that every day. It's a big game against Winnicott High School this Friday at Portsmouth. So
Home
I hope
opener.
everyone attends and shows their support.
All right.
Go Clippers.
Go Clippers. I'll wait for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.